Hello, this is Benji Warrior. You're listening to Authentic Warrior Radio. It's a podcast devoted to authenticity, resilience, and communication between diverse and passionate people. Thank you for tuning in. There's also a pretty healthy dose of antics, insanity, and humor, and some authentic bullshit. This episode is with my friend Zoie Mizuna, who is a DJ and a person whose heart is intense and passionate and got some fire in it, and she's a warrior. I'm not going to say too much more about the conversation because it was 3 hours long and there was a lot to it. We talked about everything from healing to gender equality, and we talked about love and compassion and magic and depression and communication and culture and feminism and masculinity. Before we get into the episode, I need to do a thank you shout out to my Patreon supporters: Matt Hagum, Mike Rowe, Chris Cook, Molly the Cop, Megan, and Suzanne Zeddy Mac McVisley Bear. Thank you all for supporting Authentic Warrior Radio on the Patreons. If you're listening to this and you haven't already subscribed on the Patreons, please go to patreon.com/Authentic Warrior Radio and become a supporter of Authentic Warrior Radio on the Patreons. Lastly but not leastly, I should probably show some appreciation for Cage Side Fight Co. and Toro BJJ. If you're interested in attending an indoor pool party where people are slithering around in each other's sweat and beating each other, or perhaps a feudal Japan-themed pajama party for asphyxiators and people in need of free chiropractic adjustments, be sure to dress yourself up, pretty yourself up, doll yourself up for that party by going to cageside.com and ordering yourself some new jiu-jitsu spats, fight shorts, rash guards, and some gi stuff. Gis of all shapes and sizes and colors, as long as they're gi-shaped and gi-colored. Genius Supplements is also somebody I should probably say thank you to. I don't get any money from Cage Side or from Genius, but I appreciate their products. They have enhanced my experience as a martial artist and a person who gives a F about his brain. So if you're interested in improving your brain health and optimizing your brain function so that you can think at your highest capacity, or taking some supplements that will strengthen your heart and balance your hormones, go to supplementsmarter.com and use the promo code WARRIOR at checkout to save like a certain percentage. I still need to look that up. I can't even remember how much. Promo code WARRIOR. Do it. Anyways, let's get into the episode. I think you're going to like it, especially if you listen all the way through. Have yourself a merry spring day.
I totes my goats failed to mention just now.
Zoie can be found at facebook.com/Zoie Mizuna. That is ZOIEMIZUNA. Her music can be found at soundcloud.com/ZMizuna. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to these places. I recommend checking out her live performance at the Bellingham Art and Music Festival, Saturday, June 1st, at the Lookout Arts Quarry in Bellingham. She'll be appearing at Expansion Festival, Saturday, June 22nd at 7 p.m. at the River Willow Farm in Duvall, Washington. And I shall not fail to mention that Zoie will be performing at Cascadia Northwest Music and Arts Festival, Saturday, July 27th, 9 p.m. at the Masonic Family Park in Granite Falls, Washington. Without further ado, here is Zoie.
All right, we're rolling. How's it going, Zoie Mizuna?
It's Mizuna.
Mizuna. Is it Mizuna?
It's Mizuna.
Okay.
I think I'm saying that right. My friend in Japan was like, why is your stage name like named after like a vegetable?
Oh, is it?
It's like a spicy Asian green.
I thought Mizuna was like, isn't that a place in like Arizona?
Maybe there's a place in Arizona called Mizuna. But yeah, it's like water green. I don't know. It's like Mizuna, like the kanji of it.
Okay. I'm here with Zoe. Zoe's my friend. I love you. And Zoe, I'm not really sure. I'm getting the idea that Zoe feels like I am Richard Nixon. Which, okay, we can talk about that. We were just talking about how a lot of my friends these days are people who I've met on dating apps. And it's not intentional, it's just that, like, I get along with women more, like, I tend to have more female friends than dude friends. And that's because, I could probably, it's open to interpretation probably, but, like, I didn't have a lot of dudes in my life growing up. And I think a lot of dudes have a hard time having just a friendship with a woman, but for me, that's not the case. And there's a lot of people out there, and I don't necessarily need to be banging or falling in love with all of them, but I meet a lot of them on dating apps, and I end up having really awesome friendships with them. So, yeah. I never finished answering that question, but okay, so what do you want to talk about first?
You want to talk about boot camp gate?
Yeah, sure. It's conditioning camp.
Conditioning camp. Yeah, it's your boot camp, conditioning camp that you have. Are you still leading this?
Mm-hmm. And, like, the reason I call it a conditioning camp is because, like, I think of a boot camp as, like, a place where you just go and you get the shit kicked out of you, but, like, there's no other, like, facet to it, really. Like, for me, there's a lot of philosophy behind how I do it, and there's, like, I give a huge fuck about every single person that's in that program, and we, like, there is a time for work, there's a time for play, and there's a time for, like, heartfelt conversation, which I try to do all three. So, let's talk about it.
Yeah, because that was really the last time we were talking, which was, I think, like last July 2018, and it is now March 2019, and we were kicking it quite a bit before then. Yeah. What was your experience like?
With that?
Yeah.
The way that I experienced it was I could tell that you were not digging it, and we never talked about it, and then you were gone. That's it. That was pretty much it, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to that time. Yeah, for me, I was just starting to DJ, really, in the community, and there was a lot going on in my life, and this was like an opportunity to get in shape. This is after I had relocated back to Bellingham from Virginia and had been here for a few months at that point, and I was like, all right, it's time to, like, get back in the gym. I'm feeling stable enough in these other parts of my life, but still there was, like, a lot of movement. There was a lot of transition and, you know, all these other parts. And as a female DJ in the community, I would say this is probably relevant to a lot of other places, but it's like you're the only female in the building sometimes, you know. So I was interacting with a lot of men with egos on a regular basis. I mean, who doesn't have an ego? But, you know, DJ egos are of a special sort, I guess, in this town anyway. And when you get drugs involved, like, I mean, I know a lot of DJs who enjoy coke. Yeah, and coke really amplifies the fucking ego. It does. Yeah, that's interesting. I was at a show last night where someone offered me coke. And I was like, do I look like a coke person? I don't know if I put that vibe off. I think it's just, if you come to those shows, maybe that's the expectation. I don't know. Yeah, I felt, what's the name of the gym over there? Bellingham Mixed Martial Arts. Mixed Martial Arts, yeah. So I had been going to what is now called Fight Lab, but USMA for the last, like,
more than 10 years probably at this point. Very different culture. Coming from a very different culture in terms of the etiquette and a lot of the social nuances of the group dynamics with this boot camp experience, I think...
Well, just to be clear, my program has a totally different culture to it.
It's totally different, than
the actual gym. Like Bellingham Mixed Martial Arts isn't like all the other programs. It really depends on who's running the class, but the culture there doesn't clash with my conditioning program. But the conditioning program is like very different from the feel that you would have in any of the other classes there. Like in the gi program there, the gi jiu-jitsu program is different also from any other class that you would have there.
It's like a lot more traditional, I bet.
Yeah, there's hierarchy in it, whereas all the other ones there's like no feeling of hierarchy really. And in my program, what I think sets it apart the most is that, well, like I have a lot more, I have rules, like I have expectations. And for example, like you could go into the kickboxing class and if you're late to class, that's fine. If you're late to boot camp, I keep calling it boot camp. If you're late, for every minute that you're late, you're doing 20 burpees before you get on the mat. That's just how it is.
With the other classes, if you're late?
If you're late, there's no big deal in the other classes. But being that it's a conditioning camp and that most of the people who are coming there because they have not been applying self-discipline, like that's a huge part of it. It's like learning to recognize that to show up for yourself, to you're learning to like be there. The problem is that by the time people get there, they're in such dire need of that like, and the reason that they're in that dire need is that in our lives we have so many opportunities to put our attention and our energy into something that is very important but doesn't actually provide us with like self-care. Like we're not, it's really easy to like make excuses and not show up for yourself a little bit every day to do the things that you need to for your health for legitimate reasons. There's no shortage of fucking shit that we need to do all the time. We're always fucking busy. That's just how our culture is. There's just not a lot of downtime. But we have to make time to do this thing. And most people, by the time they show up to me for my program, they have not done that in a long time or ever. And they don't have that ability to recognize that, like, yes, I am stressed out because money, or I'm stressed out because work, or I'm stressed out because I need to go home and do the dishes, or I need to whatever, or I just want to lay on the couch and relax because I'm fucking tired or whatever. Those are all legit. It's a legitimate stressor. For almost every single thing, someone sends me a message that they're not going to show up to class or whatever, like every single one of the things they write in the message, I get it. It's just that, like, when you show up to me, you're committing to putting aside 1 hour 3 times a week to be there on time and do the thing for yourself, but also for everybody else in the group. Like, we hold each other accountable, we give a shit about each other's goals, and when we show up for ourselves, we're also being there for each other, and we're reinforcing this, like, commitment that we've made to ourselves as a group. And so teamwork is really important to me, being there on time, it's just showing respect to the group, and you don't have to be happy when you show up, but if you show up and you're having a shitty day, that's totally okay. And we want to be supportive of each other no matter what we're experiencing or how we feel when we get there. But, like, not taking that out on other people is really important to me. And so sometimes when I talk about showing up, I'm talking about showing up physically, but sometimes I'm talking about showing up for the group. And that means no matter what it is that you're feeling like, don't be shitting all over everyone's experience with your emotional shit. That's all. It's like, I want to fucking hug everybody that I see who feels down all the time.
Like, I always just want to love people. But if that person walks in and they're just like in such a shitty mood that I see it start, it's like contagious and I see it spreading, I'm just like, look, okay, this isn't going to happen. We're not doing that. We have 24 hours for this 2-month session. It's 24 hours total. Like, and in that 24 hours, we're here to do things for ourselves and for each other and be positive. And it looks like, I know when that class that you fucking left after, that was like, nobody was fucking, people weren't getting their shit together. Like, nobody was communicating, nobody was listening. Like, the problem is that when it gets that disorganized, you have to have like a reference point. Everybody has to have one thing that they're all focusing on to bring the focus back, and that's what we were doing in that exercise that I think was the last one that you fucking hated. It was like, after we had a day where we were supposed to do, we were just going to do a recovery day, like foam rolling and stretching and stuff. And I showed the exercises, and then when somebody didn't know an exercise or whatever, this happened a lot, like people couldn't remember what they were supposed to do. So instead of just asking me, they would ask the whole group, and then everybody was talking over each other and nothing was getting done, and all of our fucking time was being wasted. And it was just like, all right, look, I'm going to say it again. I'll tell you what to do again. Stop talking over each other. Please just ask me so that I can be the one talking. And that way everybody's not talking over each other. We're not just like fucking up this entire class, because we only get 24 of these. And like, people are paying money to be there. They're like showing up to accomplish a goal, and I give a fuck about that goal, so I want them to get there. So I was just like,
you were having a lot of anxiety.
Well, I was having some anxiety for sure. I'm really invested in getting people to their goals, and also this is like, it was just like a shit show. It was turning into a shit show really quickly, and I was like, all right, fuck this. Here's what we're going to do. We're all going to do 100 burpees, and we're going to do them together. This is going to get us back on track. Like, we're going to count them out. Nobody's going to talk unless they're the only one talking. So here's the protocol. I will be the one talking, and I'll let you know when it's time for you to talk. That way, nobody's talking over each other. We have leadership. I'll be the leader, and when it's your turn to talk, we'll all follow you. Like, this is like getting shit back on track. That was the whole point of that exercise, and getting the teamwork working. So, and it was, dude, also, I admit that like, there have been times in my program where I've been way too much of a hard ass. I know that.
It's good to hear you say that.
I admit that. No, I'm totally aware. And I've actually had, I say this in the beginning of every session. I'm like, if you ever feel like I'm being unreasonable, I want to know. Like, I'm completely open to the idea of me being wrong. I want to know when I'm wrong. I want to be wrong. Like, I don't want to go through life and never be wrong. That's not even possible. So if I feel that that's the case, then I know that I'm wrong. And like, I want to be approached with the same kind of accountability that I'm providing other people with. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm part of the group too. I'm not exempt from any of the fucking rules. Like, when I say that I'm exempt from the rules, like, that's one of the things that I say all the time, actually, is that I'm exempt from the rules, but it's like a joke, because I consider myself an anarchist, which doesn't mean that I go out of my way to disrespect people or break the rules. It just means that when I do abide by the rules, it's because I'm choosing to. It's not because I'm being forced to. So like, when one day I was like, use 5 words to describe yourself, and we all went around, we were like in an isometric squat, and we all went around and did that. When it was my turn, it was exempt from all the rules. Mm-hmm. And Ron's like, yeah, but that's 5 words. And I was like, right, because I chose to do 5 words. If there was a rule that I had to break the rules, then I wouldn't be an anarchist. So anyway.
I feel like you were breaking the rules there. You gave 5 words.
No, what I'm saying is I wasn't breaking the rules, but I was doing that of my own I was doing that of my own will. Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't because I was abiding by the rules when I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting to like draw a parallel with that and your experience around that particular class where, I have this distinct memory of standing right in front of you, not knowing what's going on, being pretty good at like following directions. And I was like, there was a miss in how we were rotating. It was like there was some people that were just staying in place, and then there was another group that was rotating, and you were like, everybody was rotating kind of in like opposite directions, and I was watching this happen. You know what I mean? Like, I also am an instructor for fitness classes, so like I understand like the way that you explain things can be totally convoluted. Like,
well, and it's super frustrating.
Ever many times that I've been like, all right, everybody like raise your right hand, and then there's always one person that raises their left hand. You're like, all right, well, we're all getting into our body, we're getting oriented into this space, and I was watching this like chaos happen. I came to you, I was standing right in front of you, and I was like, Benji, what are we doing? Right. And I saw you like way out here getting super overwhelmed, and then just like, you just were like, all right, everybody, and it felt very punitive. And I was like, I came to you looking for clarity, and now I'm being punished.
Okay, so I want to distinguish between punishment and discipline. Because I believe in always trying to do better, but never shaming anybody. So punishment is like when you're shaming somebody. That's how I think of it.
I feel like punishment's like punitive. The like, energy behind it is punitive. It's not like, okay, you guys weren't listening, we need to do this. It's like you were like
putting a kid on timeout can be a punishment, but it's not necessarily a punishment. Like, to put a kid on timeout, it depends on why you're doing it. If you're doing it to make them feel like shit about themselves and alienate them from the rest of the group, that's punishment. Like, I'm shaming that person and making them feel ashamed. But if I'm putting that kid on timeout because I want them to have a moment to themselves so they can check in with themselves and calm down, that's not punishment. That's like teaching them a coping skill and self-discipline.
But it felt like it was what you needed. It was like you like lost control of the group, and you were like imposing your will and your control like over the group.
I was, because the
and you call yourself an anarchist. I'm like, that's pretty fascist in my mind. You're like, you were doing what I say or else. Like, you're backing it up with like this, this force and this power. If I wouldn't
have done that, it would have continued to spiral out of control, and we would have accomplished nothing.
I mean, I think that there are a myriad of actions that you could have taken in that moment. That was the one that you chose. That it didn't work for me.
It worked for everybody else.
I'm saying it didn't work for me, and I'm here right now.
I agree, and I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I was like, this is not a safe environment for me to like exercise. I was like feeling a lot of trigger around like the aggressive male energy in my life at the time. And just like being able to like get back in the gym, like I am a very disciplined person. Like I have a lot of self-discipline. And so it was like, it felt kind of a miss for me and my personality, but I can totally see, like you were saying before, a lot of people who come to that thing, like they haven't dug it, what I mean? But you've seen me, like we met and I was training to compete. I was like, dude, in the gym, awesome. Fucking 4 hours a day, like grinding.
That style, it doesn't work for everybody, and I don't do it all the time. And the people who are in my program who push themselves, they're not the ones that I'm usually doing that for. It's the ones who don't. So like I don't want people getting in their heads and yelling at themselves and treating themselves like shit, but I do want people to have a voice in their head that's like, keep going. Like, I want people to have a voice that does drive them, and it doesn't have to be a punitive voice, but it needs to be a voice that is strong and stern and is going to push them. Like, people need to push themselves, and being comfortable doesn't fucking get you anywhere when you're trying to adapt. Like, it just doesn't. And so that style doesn't work for everybody, and people who are in my program long enough, who stick around, end up usually having conversations with me. I've had conversations with people who have had similar response to what you're describing, and usually what I let those people know is like, there's a reason I don't name drop in my program, and that goes along with that whole shame thing. I don't want anyone feeling like I'm shaming them, so I don't like point people out and call people out by name. So when I address someone, or when I address someone, I do it by addressing the entire group. So people who don't need to be addressed for that thing might think that I'm talking to them, but it's a way of like, the thing is, like, I go to kickboxing class, and the first 45 minutes is fundamentals. I don't need to go and do fundamentals like
that many times a week. But I do it because you can't get enough fundamentals. So like by addressing everybody and telling them things that like they may not even need to hear, it's not hurting them to like rehear that thing. So when I like use stern or whatever, when I get stern with people and I'm a slave driving fascist, that's for the people who don't slave drive themselves. And the people who stick around and have those conversations with me, they eventually talk to me about it, and I let them know, like, you're not somebody that I feel like I have to be that way with, but there are people in the class. And I'm not going to say any names, but I know, usually they shake their head, they know who I'm talking about. And it's like, there are people who do need to be like, who respond really well to that because they don't have that in their head. Like, they don't have the ability to push themselves in
But I just don't feel like I have that slave driving, like, narrative in my head. Like, that's what made my training like unsustainable.
So like when you know you need to do some resistance training but you don't feel like it, and then you force yourself into that situation anyway, and then you get to the end of your first set and you just want to call it quits and leave, like, but you continue to stay and work out, and then like maybe you get halfway through the second set and you're like, fuck, I hate this, but you just push through anyway. Like, that is, you're driving yourself.
Yeah, but I don't have those like self-talk. Like, when I'm doing something that I don't like to do, I'm like, this is what's happening right now. I think I also come from like a meditation background, so like I may be experiencing something intense, like physically, like in my body, and that could be like an argument, that could be like sitting in rush hour traffic, that could be like hitting 9 rounds on the heavy bag, and it's like, this is what I'm doing right now, like with my time, this is what's happening. And to have this other narrative that's like, you need to like, kill yourself.
No,
it's like, no, you're just doing it. It's like, this is just what we're doing. Like,
I have people that take it the wrong way too, who like really do respond well to like that kind of
masculine.
Oh, I fucking hate that word.
We're using it.
And I don't identify as masculine at all.
I'm not saying I'm thinking about masculine and feminine in terms of like dichotomies of expression, of like masculine is more outward in expression. It's the triangle this way pointing up, and like the feminine is like receiving. So like the feminine is like, let's observe and be quiet. Let's take a breath. Mm-hmm. Like, let's shout and like have really short breath. Like, I feel like that's a more masculine or yang expression.
That's not the only thing that term is associated with, and that's why I don't like it.
It is a very loaded word. That's why I think it's important to define
It triggers
terms.
the fuck out of me, I'll just say that.
Okay, I see you're triggered.
I fucking hate that word. I hate being told that I'm masculine. Like, people look at me and make assumptions about me all the time.
I'm not making assumptions. I'm speaking about behavior. I'm trying to like speak to behaviors.
I know you're not.
Because I can be very
masculine. We've had this conversation before.
Yes, I can be very masculine as well in my expression, and that's something that I've butted up against with a lot of my female friends.
Yeah, if we're gonna use that though, like, let's just continue to define our terms and what we're talking about, so that there are no misunderstandings or assumptions.
Yes.
So there are people who respond really well to being told what to do and being, I don't want to say negatively reinforced, but who respond well to like when I'm in the ring and I'm fighting, if my coach is like, okay, now like really gently talking to me, I'm not even gonna fucking hear him. Like, I'm just not. If somebody's like if I'm like underneath someone in jiu-jitsu and I'm being in mount and I can't escape mount or whatever, and I'm like exhausted and I think I have no energy left. If my coach is like, okay, now blah, 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 do this thing. It's like, dude, I fucking hear you. All it's going to do is piss me off. It's like, it's easier said than done when you're exhausted and you're being punched in the face. But like, if my coach is like, come on, give it your all. Come on, inhale, push out, let's go, get up. Like, it drives me. Like, I do respond well to that. And some people do, some people don't. But I also have people who don't really have a very good relationship with their body, and so they respond to that by like pushing through unhealthy pain, and they end up like hurting themselves because
pain that's trying to communicate something.
Yeah, like what I want people to do is be so in touch with their body that like I want people to connect with their body and be in touch with it, and then push through when they reach this point where they don't feel like they can keep going, is it because there's like a bunch of lactic acid building up and they're going to failure? Is it because there's pain that is like an actual like injury? Is it because their mind is telling them that they can't keep going? Is it because they're nauseous? Like, what is it? If it's nausea, push through it. If you're like nauseous because you're working out, fuck it, just go. Like, you gotta get through that shit. Like, it will change. You'll adapt to that. Usually, because if you haven't worked out in a long time and you're just coming back to the gym, that happens. And some people, that'll never go away, and it's something you have to learn to deal with. I don't ever have that problem, so like,
you're a special snowflake.
I've never had that problem, but no, I have people who, instead of being connected with their body and knowing what they're feeling and respecting the feelings that, like, the feedback their body's giving them, they go to this like mental zone where they try to block everything out and just go. And they respond really well to like that forceful kind of driving language and like tone. And they do that for themselves eventually, but they do it to a degree that's like not healthy because they're not listening to their body. And that's like something that I have to be really careful with. Because like I don't just run my classes the way that you saw it that day. Like there's...
I had been coming for like 3 weeks at that point, 3 or 4 weeks. It was like about halfway.
And we have days where we're just playing around, and I have days where we play like improv games while we're working out. I have days where we're like, sometimes we'll like go to the beach and then we'll all circle up and we're just doing kung fu stances for like 40 minutes and shifting from one stance to another, and the whole time we're just joking around, like we're having a good time. And also, I prefer to have meaningful conversations with people about what they're experiencing. Like, I want that to be part of my program. Like, I love it when people come to me and talk to me about what's going on in their life. And sometimes I have to go to people and let them know that that's okay and that we can do that. Because I fucking care. I actually do. It's just, I gotta have a really well-rounded approach to the way that I run it. And it is... So, like I said, there's a time to work, there's a time to play, and there's a time for meaningful conversation. The time to work, that is boot camp. And like, I get a lot of my style of how I run my classes comes from the way that I learned Kung Fu. It's like a really traditional Southern Chinese Kung Fu school where you show up on time. You're always in line when the class starts. You don't even ask questions. And you can ask questions, but if it's perceived that you're questioning authority, it's not going to be responded to well. It's not like there's just like a lot of like traditional like loyalty, and like you kind of just have to have faith in the system and that it's going to work. And
says the anarchist.
No, right. And I ended up leaving that place after 6 years. I ended up leaving that place because I didn't leave without communicating, though. And that's not an attack on you. No, I'm just saying.
We're gonna get back. I'm just saying.
I did. Like, I wrote letters to my Sifu, that I spent a lot of time writing. And
I had many bodies of text prepared to send you. I even talked to. Yeah, I sent a message to another student who I'm closer friends with, and another.
I think I know who you're talking about. I mean, and that student actually has sent me a message at one point when that's not my phone, it's somebody else's phone. But I received a message from a student who was like, dude, I understand like your philosophies and how you run your class and everything and what you're doing, but I think that you're like not being responsible in the way that you're doing it right now. Like, I just think that like you're basically she said a lot, but to summarize it, it was like,
the way that you're doing it right now at this time in your life is not, I don't feel like it's coming from a lack of control and like a lack of self-control. And that person knows me well enough to know like what I was actually going through in my life at the time. And like, I get that you're stressed, and like, dude, I fucking loved it. I was so glad that I got that message, and I respect it. And I didn't agree with everything, because some of the way that it was said was like making a lot of assumptions and wasn't really like, I could tell that it was like really emotionally charged statements, and some of them were emotional reactions to things that I wasn't actually doing. It was like emotional reactions to what they were observing, combined with their own assumptions about me based on their past experiences and things like that. And so some of it was like, but the majority of it, like, I looked at it, I read it, I processed it, I looked at how I've been acting and how I've been running my classes, and I immediately changed. And that's how I want to do things. Like, I'm still learning. I'm always fucking learning. And I do have a lot of responsibility, and there are a lot of people who come to my program who are very different, come from very different backgrounds, need different things, and have different goals. And so I'm trying to do the best I can for everybody.
And I feel like that's kind of like what I was observing at the time, and I'm like, I recognize that I'm having my own experience. Benji's having his experience. He hasn't approached me. He obviously knows I'm not digging it, like, and we're friends. Like, he also hasn't approached me. So I was like, that was one of my apprehensions in signing up for that class in the beginning. I was like, we're both like really intense people. We both have like, this is the way that we've done it, or this is the way that we think we want to do it. And it's like, I have this like very long-standing relationship with Martine over at USMA, and it's just like a very different dynamic, you know, like the way that our relationship has developed over time is very different. And
the way that me and you have developed a friendship is different than how we interacted in the class too.
I think also too, as being one of the more like technically advanced students in there, was like a little bit challenging, because I'm like, I can go like heavy on the heavy bags, and like I can go heavy on like these things, and it was like I was pushing myself to the degree that I could push myself. Which
is why you didn't need me to be pushing you.
And then just to have people shouting like intermittently while I'm in the zone, and then someone's like, go over, because like they need that. And I'm like, it's hard for me to kind of be in my own thing. And I see how Benji's like trying to motivate some of these people that are just getting off the couch for the first time in a long time. And I'm like, I see where you're going with that, and that is not working for me. And I feel like that's going to be long-term very detrimental to like how I perceive you like as a person. So I gotta like step out. Like,
I'm glad
like,
you did.
You know,
because like I actually, like, I never stopped caring about you or loving you or appreciating you. I've always like adored you, and you were there for me. Like, when me and you got in touch after we didn't even really know each other that well before. I worked with you a little bit with nutrition stuff, and then years went by and I didn't have contact with you, and then you got back in touch with me, and
I was like in Guatemala at the time or something.
And it was in a really fucking hard time in my life, and like I wasn't talking to anybody at that time. And so when you got back in touch with me, it was like I was making human contact with someone, which was really huge. And like, I think you're just an amazing person for a lot of reasons. I think you're really sweet, and like, I give a huge shit about how you perceive me too, and about like the longevity and the health of our friendship. And there was the reason that I didn't approach you after you left is because I could feel that there was such an emotional charge, and I didn't really know how to respond to it. And we had a conversation, like a very brief one, that I didn't really say much in response to at one point, that you might not even remember, but it like really fucking hurt my feelings. And I didn't...
Was it on a post? Was it on like a Facebook post?
No, it wasn't. Well, like I don't know.
Because we didn't. I feel like
no, I know what you're talking about.
There was a Facebook post, and that was the first time we had like
afterwards.
Okay.
No, I'm talking about before that, and it was this thing that I just like let go, but it was just. Do you remember that time when we were walking, when we were looking for a place to eat, and like we had just gone to Brother Dudes, and you were like, "There's too much dude in here," and I was like, "Oh, well, let's fucking leave." Like,
they're not there anymore.
I'm not attached to like going to any of these places.
They've like had like I don't know.
I just picked that place because I heard the food was good. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And then, like, we're walking, you're like, everything is about dudes. Like, you're like, it's Bob's Burgers and Brew, there's
man pies
and stuff. We ended up going to Tadeo's, which is like a masculine like name.
It's like I can handle this form of masculinity.
And I was like, all right, let's go to the Beaver. That was a joke, and it probably was an insensitive one.
We ended up going to Bob's, I thought.
We did, but like,
and I took your Tinder photo,
and you said, like, you were like, because I was like, well, I can't even relate to this. Like, I'm not a woman. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I mean, I didn't say this, but this is what was going on in my head. I'm like, I could see that you were distressed by this, and I give a fuck. So it was just like, how do I respond to this? And I was like, well, I'm glad that you're saying all this because it's opening my mind up to, like, I never noticed this. And your response to that was, that's because you only care about yourself. And that fucking hurt, because that's so not true.
It's hard to hear
and
something
then you
like
said,
that.
And I mean that in the most loving way. And I was like, that just added insult to injury.
Yeah.
And so the last thing I want to do is approach you when you're feeling like attacked, or like, because when you left, I could feel that you didn't feel safe. And I don't know what your relationships with men have been like, but I can tell that part of your emotional response to what I was doing in my class was colored by that. And that what you were experiencing when we were walking down the street that day was also colored by that. And
probably your reaction to what I said was probably colored by your relationship with women.
I guess. I mean, it was just like, this is coming from somebody who I care about, telling me that I don't care about anyone but myself. And that's like just hard to hear from anybody, but especially somebody who I have absolutely no fucking desire to like ever be hurtful to you, and I want to communicate with effectively and compassionately and kindly. And the way that I'm doing that is by being receptive to what it is that you're saying and trying to understand it and learn more, and learn to relate to you the best way I can, even though I can't because I'm not a woman. So what you're talking about, like what you were experiencing, is something that a dude will never understand. And I'm aware of that. And I was acknowledging that I will never be able to relate to that, and I had not noticed that before. Like, those things had never crossed my mind. And that was the best thing that I could think of to do in that moment. Not only to learn from your experience, but also to like respect it and respect you, and let you know that I care about you. And so that response was just like really deep cutting for me.
Yeah, it was like a bid for connection, like from your side. Yeah. Feelings, tissues.
Okay, I'm fine.
I brought the tissues. I was like, we're gonna cry.
It's okay.
This is real. This is the real deal. This is the healing of relationships between all men and women right now, which is what 2019 has really been about for me. Yeah, I think it's...
And like, the thing is, like, I consider myself a feminist. I don't use that word very often because most of the people who actually, like, I feel like the word feminist is so, it's so loaded at this point with like, people don't understand what it means, and even the people who are feminists can mean different things.
What does it mean to you?
Yeah, what it means to me is, it's very personal for me. Like, I lived in a lot of different places growing up, a lot of different homes, and I never really had male role models, I would say, and most of the people who I identified with were women, and I saw all of them
go through a lot of suffering because of shit that they had like no control over, really. Like, I mean, just shit that was unfair, from the way that they were treated emotionally and physically to
by men.
Yeah.
Or okay.
I mean, well, and also by women, but I'm talking about, and I draw a really fucking bold line between like gender equality issues and feminism, because being a guy and recognizing that like the issue of like toxic masculinity is an issue that men have to fucking fix. Like, it's an issue that of how men are acting and how they're behaving and understanding life and the world, and that has to change in order for toxic masculinity to change. Like, it is a men's issue. So calling it feminism, the people who need to understand what's happening there, like the people who really need to open their mind and change the way that they're looking at life and behaving and feeling about things, and those people are usually people who, as soon as they hear the word feminism, they're turning their fucking ears off. So I don't consider it a feminist issue. I consider it
toxic masculinity is not a feminist issue.
I mean, it affects women, so it's a feminist issue in a different way. Like, women, it's an issue that women have to deal with in the way that, like, in the sense that they're the ones who are not only women. It's men too. That's the thing, is like everybody's suffering from it. It's not just women. It's men. It's young boys. It's people who are experiencing like the homophobic aspects of toxic masculinity. There's people, everybody's fucking suffering through this shit. The only people who can change it are men. It has to be perceived and it has to be considered a men's issue, because men won't own it if it's not. And so I can't call it feminism. The people who need to be aware of it and whose minds need to be open to it, they're not going to listen if you come at them from a feminist standpoint.
Well, who defines what toxic masculinity is, though? Is it men?
I think everybody has a responsibility to do that.
So I guess I want to connect this back.
In that case, it's still not feminism. It's everybody's issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think like feminism, as it's typically defined, is like a equality of women in society. Although I have some like issues with that, what that actually means. Is like economic equality? Is it like social equality? What does social equality like actually look like?
Mm-hmm. And gender issues is close to home for me too. I'm like raising a child who I'm seeing her change more and more every day. I have a hard time even using she and her pronouns, because she said that she wants to use she and her pronouns because it's the easiest thing, because that's her born gender. That's what she told me. And I'm like thinking, well, I'm wondering if she's actually doing a service to herself by doing that, or just trying to make it easier for other people. Because I said, how does it make you feel when someone calls you a girl? She goes, I don't care, really. And I said, but if your preferred pronoun is she, or when someone calls you a boy, because people call her a boy all the time, they assume she's a boy. And I said, well, if you prefer she and her, how come like most of the time you just go along with it and you don't let them know that you're a girl? And she said, because I don't want them to feel bad for calling me that. And I'm like, and I understand where she's coming from with that. And that's a lot to take on at 10 years old.
Or maybe it's not. It sounds like it's pretty like...
I mean,
I feel like it's very loaded for adults. It's like, if you're not claiming your pronoun out for the, maybe non-biologically given pronoun to the world.
Well, and she lives in a place, like her home, in our house, like it doesn't... Boy and girl is like... We don't even fucking care. There's nothing attached to that. Like, the idea of gender, when I talk to Ari about gender, and I'm like, what does your biological gender say about your personality? She's like, nothing. Like, and that's how I feel, because I don't feel like I fit in with most men. Like, the conversations that I have with people, I can't have these conversations with most men. Like the way that I'm able to sit here with you and talk to you about like and open my heart up to you and stuff, like most men aren't even comfortable with that. And I don't want that. I don't want my kids to ever feel that way. And so
what does that have to do with their like gender identity though?
Because we learn our gender identity. Like we learn what the implications of it are in terms of how we relate to other people. Like
how we relate to other genders.
That's why probably. For the majority of my life, I was ashamed of who I was and felt like I needed to be more manly. Like I felt so ashamed. I didn't even like. I didn't learn to drive a car till I was 26 because I had panic attacks, and I felt like such a quote unquote pussy because I wasn't a fucking man. I wasn't man enough to drive a car. I should not only be able to drive a car, I should drive a really fast one, and I should know how to fix it.
Yeah.
Like,
how do you feel right now as you're like talking about this?
Really upsets me.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that way anymore. Like I don't have that.
Yeah.
I have.
But like even thinking about it, like
no. But here's the thing. I racked up $20,000 in student debt, going to school to learn how to be a machinist, to show myself that I could do that. Because it was an emotionally, I don't fucking want to be a machinist. Like, I hate being a machinist. But so I had to show myself that I could do it.
You were feeling insecure about your expression of masculinity, and so
which is fucked. Which is totally fucked. Like, I spent 3 years of my life learning how to be a mechanic, a welder, and a machinist. Like, these things that I never thought I could do. Like, I felt so ashamed that I didn't know how to fix the fucking faucet in I remember when I was a kid, I was the man of the house. So I grew up in a household full of women who, it was interesting, all of them were pro-life. I'm not pro-life. To this day, I would have a really heated argument with them about that. I'm pro-choice. They were all pro-life. Like, they were very, like, they were not feminist women. And like there were household tasks that were divided up, and I got the manly ones, the ones that are considered manly. Like I was the one who killed spiders, even though I'm terrified of spiders. I was the one who went out and dealt with the fucking spiders. That fucking drove me crazy. I'm in a household full of people. I remember my earliest memory of a spider was when I was like 2 or 3 years old. And I was fucking terrified. My mom was screaming. She was like at the other end of the hallway pointing to it and screaming and looking at me like the spider's coming at me. And she's looking at me like I'm gonna die. And I was just like freaking out. That never left. I live in a household full of people that always react that way. Why would I be any fucking different? But because I'm a boy, it's my job to go and fucking deal with it. Like that kind of shit is just like, I don't know. So I felt like I should be able to do all these things. I should be able to fix things. I should be able to be this like butch, manly fucking man. Which it drives me crazy that genetically the way that I look on the outside doesn't match who I am on the fucking inside. But if I let my hair grow, it looks like shit because I'm balding because I have fucking testosterone. And I have like male pattern baldness, so I shave my head and that makes me look like a fucking hard ass. And people respond to me as if I'm this masculine, manly man, and it doesn't, it immediately takes away my voice and my ability to actually, like, I feel like people make decisions about who I am before I even talk a lot of the time. And I have a podcast.
You have a very intense look on your face sometimes.
A lot of the time.
Just when you were talking about the panic attacks you had when you were 26?
Yeah,
or
I had
whatever?
them all the time. My whole family almost died in a car accident when I was like 10.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think that part of the like unpacking of toxic masculinity has a lot to do with the self-reflection that I feel lacking in the very outward expression of self.
And the thing is, like,
in males,
I'm aware of this. Like, I'm aware of what I'm feeling.
But are you aware of how you're coming off to somebody else who has a different experience than you?
Right. Here's the thing. If I come off very emotionally and that triggers somebody, the response, what do you want me to do? Because do you want me to just like shut it off? Be cold? Cool? Just chill, be cool, because that's what fucking men teach their boys.
So you're getting really intense right now.
I know, and it's not at you, it's at those men.
But I'm still receiving this intensity by being in proximity to you. So that's what I'm talking about, is that awareness, because I feel like men get very intense just in their own experience, and you're like, yo, you could kill me. That's what women, like, men are more concerned that women are gonna like leave them or make fun of them, and women are more concerned that a man would like cause like physical harm to them. There's like
I hope that at this point you know that I will never fucking lay a finger on you.
That's not our dynamic in particular, but that's the reptilian brain that's responding.
Yeah.
You know, like, you are meant to go out and hunt the buffalo.
Yeah. No, I'm fucking not. That's bullshit.
Well, that's what I'm saying biologically.
I disagree.
You're bigger, the males are bigger, they're stronger, like evolutionary speaking.
I'm not even human.
What do you call that?
I have more
red herring or a non sequitur, or like
no.
It's like, I'm just saying something that's kind of related
DNA,
but not totally related to what we're talking about.
You're right. It's probably a logical fallacy that I'm like using.
I think it's a non sequitur, like when you just say like a phrase or a word.
I feel like where I was coming from with that though is like I disagree that biologically, like, my job is to go out and hunt the buffalo.
I mean, I feel like that's a broad generalization of like how males are more like task oriented, more like linear thinking. They're like, I'm gonna go out and we're just gonna sit and like look over the bush and like, when the buffalo goes by, we're gonna hit them in the head with a rock.
Humans have less like sexual dimorphism than any other fucking hominid. Like Homo sapiens.
I'm just gonna believe you for the sake of moving forward in the conversation.
I'm just saying, like I don't, dude. Also, the thing is, like, prior to fucking sedentism, when we were still living in foraging societies, we were all sharing the same responsibilities. Like, we were doing everything together, and men and women all did all the things. And it wasn't until we started switching over to having hierarchies and state formation that men started leaving, because when all the areas around you are settling, you can't actually hunt and gather in far off places because those places are owned by settlers at that point. So then you have to go, you use up all the resources in your area, you have to go out and get jobs. The women are nursing the children, so they're staying at home. Like, that's how the whole fucking, like, the hierarchy based on like income, like that's where it all started. Like and even today, if when foraging societies stop foraging, within 10 years there's domestic abuse in the household. Like when a foraging society becomes domesticated, and the men are leaving the house and they're the ones making the money because the women have to stay at home and nurse the children and stuff. And that's really the number one thing, is like the nursing aspect of it. Like within 10 years, there's domestic violence. And these societies that have been functioning in this way, this egalitarian way, for thousands of years. So, like, I'm not going to, it's really hard for me to accept that because I have a penis, like, I'm supposed to have a completely different, like, purpose and function in the family role. And I'm not the fucking buffalo killer. I'm not fucking vegan, but I'm not the buffalo killer. You could kill
a buffalo.
I believe I could too. I have more Neanderthal variants than 76% of 23.
I could kill a buffalo.
Okay then, you're the buffalo hunter too then.
Yes, but if we were to both go at each other, you would most likely win.
The fact is, I would never go at you.
That's not the point. That's the part of the brain that's just like survival.
And you don't think I experienced that with men too?
That's not what we're talking about.
Because I'm a short guy.
We're talking about how
dude. I'm actually a little guy.
We're actually going back to my original statement, which was having to do with unpacking toxic masculinity, in that, in my experience, there seems to be a disconnect from how men express themselves and how they how their perception of somebody else's experience of them.
And the reason for that is the same reason that I hate using the word masculinity in the first place, because I think I've explained it this way before. I've explained it this way to a lot of people. This is the way I think about it. If you've got a healthy, happy, integrated person who's healthy emotionally, spiritually, physically, and they have like all these different coping strategies and ways of communicating and just intrapersonal and interpersonal like intelligence, and then you take that list and then you start a new list on the other side of the paper. You draw a line down the middle and you move like 5 of those fucking coping tools over, and at the very top is like aggression and anger, and those are the ones that are acceptable to this other category of people, and you label that one masculine and the other one feminine. Then you're pigeonholing all these fucking people who are born with a penis into this group of people that is learning their entire lives by our fucking culture that it's only okay to be this way because it's weak to be this other way. And like, that's why when I emote, the truth is that when I seem to be like, when I'm emotional about stuff, it's scary, is because like, for the majority of my life, I didn't know that when I was angry, I was actually hurting. Like, because when I'm in pain, I should be able to use all these other fucking tools to understand myself and to communicate about it. But instead, almost my whole fucking life, I was unaware that this anger that I'm experiencing, this lashing out to injustice, or this feeling that I have
to throw a chair across the room.
Yeah, well, or just to raise my voice or whatever. Like, this feeling that I tend to actually focus it inward a lot of the time, because that's also part of being a man, is you just focus that anger inward because you should not show emotion, because that's not cool. But you are. Right?
Like, women are picking up on that. I'm keeping it in. It's like you're
because you can't keep it in. It doesn't work.
No, you can't. You have to relax your face in order to do that. And if you relax your face, your nervous system will most likely relax.
Yeah, exactly.
And
you see dudes walking around all the time, and then when they do fucking emote, they explode. And that's because of that fucking gender binary that we're fucking reinforcing every time we use these fucking terms. Like, I prefer to just let everybody know that it's okay to be human and this is what it means. Take all these things, they are purposeful, but only every fucking once in a while and only with control, and they only work in a healthy way if you use them with all these other tools. So take them, shove them back into the other list, make yourself a human being, like a healthy human being. But like, yeah, like I said, like, for me, dude, it took me a long time to figure out that there was like this sequence of events, a sequence of emotions that I was feeling every time I got angry. All I knew was I was pissed for the longest time. And then I remember one day I felt this, I was so angry, and but it slowed down in my head, and I was like, holy shit. I just felt attacked, and I felt really fucking hurt, and immediately needed to be strong and needed to be hard and like not
pulling out the weapon,
be vulnerable. And I needed to put armor on and not be vulnerable.
Your gun.
Exactly. To me, it feels like it's just this rough exterior that blows shit away. It's like this force field that isn't just a shield, but it's like a
mushroom cloud.
Yeah, kind of.
It's like Hiroshima.
Yeah, it's just like a wall of force that's like, fuck you.
That's what I'm saying, and that's what I'm saying back to boot camp, was I could feel that from you. And I'm like, I don't know what's behind that, but the part of me that's had to respond to violent males in the past was very activated in that moment. Mm-hmm. And I could see that there was a lot of nuance, a lot of, feelings behind that, feelings of control, like many layers of emotions that you were experiencing during those classes. And as an act of self-preservation, which is like something I'd like you to kind of acknowledge, if you would, is that when women are responding, when women are like scared, I'll speak for myself, when I'm like, I gotta pull back, I have to self-preserve, because yeah, it's destructive. Like, I have been in situations with males where it's like the aggressive looks and the body language like led to shouting, led to objects being thrown, led to like weapons being like brandished at me, you know, and it's like, your life is just a series of, you know, data point collection, you know what I mean? So it's like, now I have a lot of data collected in this pool, and this is starting to look similar to like this one study that I did. And you're like, well, I could, you know, maybe duck out before my hypothesis is concluded or not. So
and I can see that was happening. And
I think for a lot of women, that happens with men. It's like, I'm not going to walk down that alley right now. I haven't even approached them. Those might be totally awesome guys, like hanging out, just like smoking a joint. Like maybe they would offer me some, we'd have a great conversation about music, and I go home and it's chill. But this is like historical, political reality, and the data is stacked against you. So whether or not you're having these own experiences, you're like, I'm feeling really hurt, and like this is my expression of hurt right now because I've had to really build up that very small toolbox in terms of how I express myself from childhood, from all of my experiences. But in that moment, she doesn't know that.
Yeah, and I saw that you were withdrawing because you didn't feel safe. I did see that. I did not know how to respond to that. And part of that was like that.
Just that, man. Just like, I see you I don't know how to respond, and hit send. And it's just like, you know what I mean? Like reach across the table and just like, hey, I acknowledge you.
I didn't know if I would be lighting a fuse to a conversation that was gonna explode in my face. Like when we were walking down the street that night. Like I tried to see you that night when we were walking down the street and you said that thing. That, like, I didn't, like, it was even more emotionally charged after the class, right? So there was even more of an emotional charge than there was that night. I don't want to, like, reached out to you to try to do, to me it felt like.
So you felt shut down.
Well, and I felt more like, I don't know how to respond to this without possibly fucking up this friendship. Like, because that night when we were having that conversation.
And I said, you only care about yourself.
Dude, that just hurt my feelings a lot.
Which was really, and I'm really sorry that is how you took in what I said. I'm a very sarcastic person. And I think in that moment, you know, sometimes I just care about myself and like what my goals are. Like that, me leaving the class, I was like, I gotta take care of me. You know, and it's not, I'm just like, yeah, you have your experience, like as a man growing up like in a fucking patriarchal society, like you have your own experience, and you even said, you're like,
a really unique experience.
I haven't thought about, I don't know what that's like, because you're perceiving your reality from your body, from your consciousness. So what I mean by you only think about yourself, it's not to say that you don't give a shit about other people, but it's that your reality exists within like your entire scope of experience throughout your entire life. And like you could not know another person's experience, especially like a female. I think you could probably relate to maybe some, you know, if you had a conversation like this with another man, it's like, oh yeah, you know, like I feel that anger and I know what that energy is like, and that expectation that's like really embedded into like your identity from like childhood. And like women have their own identity around their gender that's embedded in from childhood as well. And so I just want to say that like I don't see, like obviously like when I was in Charlottesville, like you were like one of the only people that I was regularly like communicating with from back here. You know, like even some of my closest friends are just, you know, kind of like whatever, it's very hard to get a hold of them, but we would have like solid conversations about like your stuff and my stuff. And so I obviously don't think that like you don't care about other people by saying you only think about yourself. So
I really don't want to be a toxic person in general, let alone somebody who's contributing to this like issue of like men not being able to experience their emotions in a way that is healthy for everybody. And I'm really fucking sorry that I did that. I don't want to be that person. So, and I'm sorry that you felt that way. And like, I mean, I'm sorry that what I did, like, invited you to feel that way.
This is the real deal.
I was like fucking freaking out before you came over.
Really? I could feel it when I walked in. You were just like, all right, we're gonna...
Same reason I didn't fucking reach out to you after that happened. Seriously, it's same reason. Like, all the same stuff came up before you came over.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I could feel my body, my anxiety was like going, I could feel my body like getting ready for, like, it felt like I was getting ready for a barrage of like of anger.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, like, I knew, I even was talking to myself about it, and I knew that, like, that was coming from me, and that that wasn't necessarily what was going to happen, but like that was just like, also, like, when I was a kid, like, I was really sensitive, and I would go to school and like people could be like sarcastic with each other and joke around about stuff, but if somebody made a sarcastic comment to me that somebody else probably would have just laughed off and been okay with, I would have ended up in tears. And so, like, and that's because I was physically and emotionally abused, and also pretty neglected. So, like, I still have that response sometimes, and it's really hard for me to, like, I have to remember that, like, a lot of times those feelings are coming from me and my own fear, from my own past experiences.
Yeah. Just having a moment here. Yeah, man. And that's, yeah. I feel like this is what it is, really. It's like, I feel this, you know, everything with like the Me Too movement, it's like, this is right on the surface for like a lot of people right now, I think. And I really am observing that whatever that stronghold of like, this is how it's just going to be, I feel is collapsing.
What do you mean this is how it's just going to be?
The relationship between men and women, you know, how we relate to each other. You know, we all have to look at like those deep hurts individually and those experiences and be like, these are mine. These are mine. You know, we can't control what happened to us in the past. We can't undo any of that stuff. It's like, it's all in the moment how we're like integrating. You know, it's like my reaction to like leaving boot camp was like, that's how I was able to integrate like everything in that moment. And like, I think really, especially for men and women and how they're relating to each other, is like being able to reach across the table and be like, I see you. And I see that you're like doing what you need to do to preserve and survive, you know, especially for men, you know, like I see toxic masculinity and like, those, yeah, I mean, it's not about like the whole like the gender bill around like if trans people can go into the women's bathroom or not. It's like, it's not about like if we feel like comfortable with your expression of gender identity. It's that like a person with a penis coming into like a mostly vaginal space has like a lot of connotations like historically. Do you feel me on that? Regardless of the politics around gender identity. You know,
I feel you on that?
Well, I'm just saying society in general. So I'm just like, or like seeing the men down the alley and like, I don't want to go down there because like, you know, we don't have like battered men's shelters, although maybe they're, you know, that could be a thing. But most of the people, you know, I worked with domestic violence agencies. I've worked with, you know, the ratio of violence towards women is very extreme in this country in particular.
I think there is a lot of like emotional abuse that men experience from men and from women, and like, you know how like statistically men or women So the diagnoses of depression are way higher in among women than men. But like men, the suicide rate's higher.
Yeah.
And like men are less likely to report it when they just don't. We're not supposed to show that we're hurting. Like, and so, and a lot of us, like, we just feel ashamed that we're hurting or that we're sad or depressed, and we just try to shut it down. And I think there is a lot of emotional abuse that goes both ways. And men just don't fucking report it. They just won't talk about it. And I'm not a men's rights activist, so don't get that idea.
Nope.
Men's rights activists are a completely different thing. But no, I just think everybody's fucking hurting, and I want that to be something that I want everyone to know that, like, if that's happening, I'm not okay with it. And I don't want to be misunderstood in the way that I, like, am communicating my shit, like, and how I run my class and shit. It's a boot camp. I mean, it is a boot camp. There's so much more to it than that, and that's why I don't like calling it that. But it is a fucking boot camp, and there is going to be this, like, boot camp kind of flavor to it. Like, that's what attracts a lot of people to it, is like they want to go and get whipped into shape. And I want to be the whipper. Okay, I want people to be their own whippers. The thing is, psychologically, I don't want people to become reactive people with an external locus of control. I want people to be their own locus of control. Like, I want people to have their own sense of drive and motivation. And so I don't want to be a codependent to all of the people that I train. I don't want them to be dependent. I want them to be interconnected and interdependent with each other. And so if I'm too much of a slave driver, like, then I'm going to put people in a reactive state, and then they're just going to be like on edge, waiting for the next thing that I do and trying to or waiting for the next thing that I say and ready to respond. And that's like a fucking battered fucking mentality, and I don't want that. So, like, you having an experience like that, feeling like that's what was happening, I value your feedback, and I would have been open to you talking to me about it, like, right off the bat. Mm-hmm. I was afraid to reach out to you. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to fuck shit up even more. And I didn't, even though I had absolutely no fucking ill will or like any kind of negative feelings about who you are or like judgments about you, and like, I was really happy that you were there in the first place. Like, I was afraid that if I reached out to you that you wouldn't know that, and that your reaction to me would be emotionally charged, and then we wouldn't have communicated very well because I was already freaking out. Like, I was already scared. And
you had to come from a more grounded place before you could communicate.
And I'm glad that we're doing it on a podcast because this podcast, my whole thing is like, authenticity is super important to me, and vulnerability is important to me, and everybody's fucking listening to this right now, and anybody who's listening to this, they're hearing this is real shit. This is somebody who I love and care about and haven't talked to in a while because there was a breakdown of communication. And well, you've heard it. I mean, you heard what happened. but if also, like, everything that I'm saying about how I feel and what happened and the way I think about things, it's me trying to apply it's me trying to apply the wisdom that I've gained in life the best that I fucking can. And if I'm wrong about any of it, I invite anybody who's listening to give me feedback. Like I'm serious. Like
Step into the ring.
It's not even a ring.
It's a nice L-shaped desk.
Step into the fucking support group. Like, just be here. Like, let me know. I want to know. I don't want to be a fucking asshole. And I definitely don't want to make anyone feel like shit. Like, the whole reason why I run my program is because I want to bring people together. And I want people to love each other and themselves. And it sucks that it sucks that what you experienced was not that. And I take responsibility for fucking up, I guess. Not having the right methodology, I guess.
My phone's like way over there.
Yeah, I don't know. These mics pick up everything.
They must. Oh, maybe it is my phone across the room. Yeah. Sorry about that. Bitch is trying to get a hold of me.
This has been a really awesome episode. We've touched on all the things that are really important for me to talk about in this podcast. Authenticity, resilience, and communication are like the biggest ones. And then on top of that, I used to have a podcast before this that I didn't do much with. It was called Authentic Bullshit Podcast.
Oh.
And it was real conversations between real people about real shit with a healthy dose of antics, insanity, and humor. And I've recently kind of added back in the antics, insanity, and humor into this one. So it's authenticity, resilience, and communication with a healthy dose of antics, insanity, and humor.
What do you mean? What are antics?
Antics is like...
In this context?
Yeah. We haven't anticked.
Yeah.
We haven't. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you ever antic?
I don't know what that means.
What does it mean to you?
I don't know what that means.
What are antics?
Antics?
Yeah.
Isn't that like idiosyncrasies, like quirks in which ways in which you do things that are unique and atypical?
When I think of antics, I think of like Tom and Jerry.
Foolish, outrageous, or amusing behavior.
Excellent. I love it. I want that.
I feel like those are all totally different things. Foolish, outrageous, and amusing are totally different things.
Then that means that we have that much wider of a variety.
It's like you could just do whatever you want, basically.
Yeah, totally.
And if you find it foolish, outrageous, or amusing, then it is an antic.
So it's totally like subjective.
So we haven't done anything really. It's been very serious.
And then insanity. People say that stupid fake
I was going to
definition.
say it's going to be the Beachbody workout based on your algorithms.
The state of being seriously mentally ill. Okay.
I'm
does
always
depression count? Because
can you look up the etymology of it? I'm all about etymology.
Yeah, I love that shit too. Or extreme foolishness or irrationality is the other definition. Insanity. Etymology. Late 16th century, from Latin insanitas, from insanus, see insane.
Mentally damaged. Latin word insanus, mad, unsound mind. Outrageous.
Okay, well, I'm mentally damaged. I actually am. I don't know if you've noticed, but my head's deformed from multiple head traumas.
In fighting?
Apparently when I was a little kid, I would get into these fits of like anxiety and I would smash my head into things. And then when I was in middle school, I was suicidal at one point and I smashed my head into a pole over and over again. And then when I was about 18, I was walking home one night and I came across a group of drunk guys and they tried to fight. They tried to like jump me basically, and one of them was way bigger and stronger and picked me up from behind. And like, even with the skill that I have and the strength that I have now, which is way better than what it was then, like, I still wouldn't really, that's a really hard position to escape from or defend from. And I ended up getting choked out, and I woke up, like when I came back to consciousness, I had no vision, my body was numb, and I had no hearing. And then my hearing came back, and then my vision came back. There was like barely any color, and my body was still numb. And then as soon as like I was able to feel anything, it was still really tingly and everything, and like my head was getting kicked up against the curb. So I'm like laying sideways on the concrete, and my head was like bouncing off the curb over and over again. And yeah. So, and it didn't end there. It continued. I ended up getting back up and fighting again. And I actually ended up walking away from that situation. But like, yeah. And I got like, I've had so many concussions in my life from like extreme sports and shit. And I had 4 concussions in the last year. One of them was from doing tree work. I was working for a tree service, and I got hit with a log. And the log hit me in the chin and knocked my head back, and like my atlas touched my spinal cord, and I got a bad concussion. And then I've got concussions in the ring too. And then I've gotten concussions from snowboarding, from wrestling. They happen a lot in jiu-jitsu, because like you use your head as like a limb to like you use your head to like as another foot, fulcrum. Basically. Point. You use it as a fulcrum for head control when, like, in Muay Thai, like when you're clinching with someone, you use head control. And then, like, but in wrestling, like, I'll have my head and like one of my legs on the ground and maybe one hand. So I'm like actually using it as like a support, and that's why a strong neck is really important. But that doesn't do damage. But when you're doing things like that in a situation where you're moving and things are unpredictable, like
seems like a combination of all those things probably contribute to your antics.
Yeah, I think what comes out really with usually what happens with, like, it depends on where the damage happens, but like for me, considering it's like most of it was right on the front of my head, that would be like what boxers usually get, like dementia pugilistica, where there's like prefrontal lobe damage, and that's like the inhibitory part of your brain, and usually that causes like people to have like outrage, and like they'll react really quickly to things that, like loud noises stress me out. That's part of like I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD twice, and like part of that is like sensitivity to loud noises too. But I can remember that, I mean, when I was a really little kid, I remember like if there's a lot of loud noise, I just wanted to get on the floor and just lay there and curl up. And I have a really hard time, like I get really stressed out, like my whole body just like tenses up if things are really, really chaotic around me. And
I think that's probably, we're both very sensitive people. And when you are having a physiological, neurological reaction like that, I mean, you're emitting like all kinds of pheromones, and people can smell that.
Like bees smelling fear. Like
they say that you can smell fear. I mean, it's definitely like a pheromone that the body emits.
That's crazy.
And some people that, like, I have a very sensitive sense of smell. And so, I mean, I just remember I went into this interview for a job like in the last spring. And I was feeling super chill about the interview. I'm just like, totally got this. I interview really well. And I was sitting in the room with like 1 or 2 other people, and then like slowly like more people like showed up, and like I was just sitting in there, like I was just like reading a magazine or something, and all of a sudden I felt like all this anxiety in my body, and I was like, what the fuck? And then like there was something about the room that was like closing in on me, and I was like looking at like the woman sitting across, and she was just like tapping her, and then this guy over here was like nibbling his like nail, and then I was like, holy fuck, like everyone in here is like super stressed out, and it's like choking me out right now. I was like, as soon as I like left, I was like, oh my God, I can breathe.
Really ashamed about this, and I never show it to anyone. I always keep my fingers hidden. But like, yeah, that's an issue for me. Oh man. But yeah, the dark alley thing, not wanting to walk down the dark alley when there's a group of dudes there. It's, I mean, also looking the way I do, I'm like, when there's a group of guys and one of them wants to impress the other, I'm the perfect fucking target.
Oh yeah, you're all muscles.
But I'm short.
But still.
Yeah, I'm badass enough that it would be impressive to kick my ass.
You're just like, I'm gonna like crush your jaw with my hands.
I'm 5'7" and 190 pounds. I look like Joe Rogan kind of, except he's way in better shape than me right now because I've been like, I just got out of a really deep depression where I wasn't really working out a lot and I was drinking too much. No, like I'm the perfect target if you're a drunk douchebag trying to impress your friends. I look like you might be able to kick my ass. Like you have a decent chance at winning, and it would be really impressive if you did.
And even if you didn't, they could probably give you a run. I mean, I don't know. You know freaking jiu-jitsu and stuff.
The thing is, if it's just one guy, they're not gonna fuck with me. And they'll fuck with me if they've got people to impress, especially if they know that if they start to lose, their friends will jump in. And then they all get to have fun. Like, that happens.
Has that happened in Bellingham?
All the time. Like, I don't go downtown very often because...
That's happened in Bellingham for you.
Yeah.
People are trying to scrap with you
I go
in
downtown,
the alley behind the Royal.
I don't even go down that alley, dude. Like, when I go downtown to Bellingham, I go to, like, the local, and I'll just, like, sit there and have a couple drinks. Like, I know, like I only talk to the bartenders. Like, I don't know. I used to be a bouncer at Red Rum. Nobody fucked with me when I was there. But I was like actually in fighting. I was like training for fights, and I was in the
That's when we were still talking. I remember we brought a gaggle of people to Red Rum.
I was in really good shape at that time. Nobody fucked with me. Or I'll go to like Red Light. I like Red Light a lot. It's super chill. It's like really relaxing. I only go there during the week when there's like not a bunch of fucking douchebags.
You don't go to like Studio B on a Saturday.
Oh, fuck no. I can't stand loud places. Like, I don't like to go to loud places. It's different if it's like a music festival. Music doesn't do the same thing to me. I love what music does. I'm really sensitive to sound in general, so music, like, I feel like that maybe has heightened my like senses with music too. Oh,
DJing has definitely made me more sensitive to sound. Definitely. Well, now when I hear shitty music, I'm like, I can't even physiologically stand it.
Well, music, like, I'm careful with music in the way that I'm careful with like not getting addicted to drugs, because I don't want to be reactive to an external thing. So like, I'm afraid of using antidepressants. I'm afraid of using anything as having an external locus of control in any way. So like with music, I'm like, I know how much I love it and I can use it to alter my mood, but I become like really reliant on it. Mm-hmm. And then there's like that hedonic fucking wheel in psychology where you're like constantly trying to like you're reaching towards the next best thing and trying to make yourself feel better, and then you get used to that, and then suddenly I'm like, there's nothing on Spotify I want to listen to anymore. And I know that's a problem because dude, how much fucking music is on Spotify? There's a lot
of shit on Spotify.
Right?
There's a lot of music out there just in general, and like when you're trying to put together trying to put together a mix, it's like that's when it's stressful, because it's like I'm looking for like the good shit, and then it has to come to you, you know?
When you're laying there and you're like, there's nothing good on Netflix. That's such, dude.
First world problems.
Seriously. Or like when you're laying there, or you're like on your phone, you're like, none of this music is good to me anymore. And like millions of songs. I've heard millions of songs in my life, I'm sure. And like none of it fucking makes me feel good anymore. There's something wrong there. Like, so I'm like really careful with like becoming desensitized to music, or like constantly chasing after a feeling or a vibe. Like, I don't want to be reactive to that shit. But I'm also just like a really weird person, so.
No, I mean, it makes sense. I think like external locus of control, that's what you call it. Mm-hmm. I like that.
That's a term from psychology. We should Google it. I love Googling shit so that I'm not using the wrong I'm not like misdefining
external
something.
Hard drive.
Because like when I was Okay, in personality psychology, locus of control is the degree to which people believe that they have control over the outcome of events in their lives, as opposed to external forces beyond their control. People with a strong external locus of control tend to praise or blame external factors such as the teacher or the exam. Well, that was like a really fucking specific... Vanilla. Yeah, and very specific.
Vanilla definition.
But then, like, also, like, what's is it called the hedonic wheel? Hedonic treadmill. Okay. This is something I'm very fucking careful with, too. That in conjunction with external locus of control. The hedonic treadmill, also known as hedonic adaptation, is the observed tendency of humans to quickly return to a relatively stable level of happiness despite major positive or negative effects or life changes. So, like, you set your sights on something and you, like, know it, you feel like it's going to make you happy, you strive to achieve it, you get there, and then you adapt to it to the point where it's like it's no longer good enough to bring you that feeling of euphoria. So then you got to do the next thing, and you're just constantly trying to raise the bar higher and higher.
But this is like the tendency or the ability to return to like a stable level.
Yeah, this is a problem if you're like trying to feel euphorically happy, and
because this will happen
because you'll reach that stable level again.
It looks like bipolar, like usually when people like talk about bipolar, they do this, they do the like the waveform. It's like it goes up and it goes down, and here's like your baseline basically, but some people have much bigger mountains and valleys. And
I think, I mean, what it is like dopamine dependency and becoming resistant kind of to dopamine. Like you need more and more of it to get the same feeling. And so every time so all addiction is a dopamine response, like an addiction to a dopamine response, regardless of whether it's like porn addiction or drug addiction or alcohol or gambling addiction. Like there's intermittent reward in all of those things, and you're constantly looking for that reward response, which is just dopamine in your brain.
Do you feel like you experience that with social media?
No, not really. I know what you mean. Not personally. For me, it's like I said, music is a big one. Alcohol for sure. And I experience the dopamine response a lot with like snowboarding. So like during snowboarding season, if I start writing a lot, like if I go snowboarding frequently, I start to like become more hedonistic in my life in general, and then I become really emotionally reactive to things, and I just start like I want to drink more, I want to go see music more. I kind of get into this general like party mode in that chapter of my life. And it all starts with like that first ride of the year, and I'm like, oh, there's that euphoria, and then like because I get this dopamine blast when I do it, and then it's like, well, what do I got?
Fucks up your whole chemistry.
What do I got to do to get that again? Like, and then every time I do, and then I'm going snowboarding every weekend, and it's not fun enough. Now I want to like take a vacation and go snowboarding all week, and like call out of work and not fucking and like whatever. So
yeah, I feel like especially like if you're like experiencing intermittent like depression, like having those like higher peaks of euphoria, dopamine response can be very dangerous.
And that's why meditation is reinforcing an internal locus of control. And even though your body is actually an external thing, when you're coming from it from like a consciousness or Buddhist standpoint, if you're taking a dualistic, like in psychology, there's like dualism and monism. Like monism is basically taking an only materialist approach to understanding the body and consciousness. Basically, if you're a monist, you believe that consciousness and the brain are one and the same. That like they're not two different things that interact with each other. That the brain, everything about consciousness is a response to something that happens in your brain. Whereas in dualism, it's Cartesian dualism, you like think of it as they're two things that are happening simultaneously and interacting with each other, which is interesting because I talk to my kids about all this stuff, and my my son is a dualist, but doesn't believe in God or heaven. And he argues that, because Ari says she's a monist and believes that all consciousness is like neurochemistry, but she believes in God and heaven. And I'm like, well, how does that work? So when you die, your brain dies, your consciousness dies. So how do you continue to exist in an afterlife?
But does she believe in it in that it is a place of existence, like heaven?
Mm-hmm. She believes it in the
like
way that it's been
place.
taught to her, like in school.
They're teaching.
Or not in school,
Heaven
and
in school.
like their mom takes them to church sometimes. Don't get me started. Like, don't institutionalize my kid, damn it. I want her to have as much freedom to create her own beliefs and everything. Or at least when she's learning about them, I want her to learn about them from like somebody who's saying, oh, this is an idea that's out there, just like all these other ideas.
Think about this.
You can have
come
these,
to your own conclusions.
Yeah, like you can choose to have these ideas and make them yours, or you can make up your own. Like, that's where I'm coming from.
You can do whatever you want.
Exactly. Like, that's where I'm coming from with it.
Relationship anarchist.
Existence is a fucking empty canvas. Yeah, and you can paint on it, but other people are painting on it too, so just be aware of that. Like, I'm totally a relationship anarchist. Most people have no idea what that means and totally misunderstand me when I say that.
Yeah, I have a good friend a couple friends that identify with the non-hierarchical polyamory.
Yeah.
I think is a more palatable, and also probably pretentious sounding way of saying relationship anarchy.
I started like the biggest and most active polyamory group in Bellingham because I was in a relationship that I sensed that there was a need coming from the other person to sleep with other people. And
is that a need?
Well, actually, honestly, like, it depends on whether or not you look at polyamory as an orientation or preference. Is it just something that you want, or is it part of who you are?
Something inherent in your biology.
Yeah. Like, if it's an orientation, then it is a need. It's like a gay person, like, needing to be sexually, like, connected with somebody of the same sex or whatever. Like, it's like if I were
like, if you don't get that, you're gonna die.
Is that what a need is? Something that you need or else you'll die? Because what about Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Because only the ones you're describing are only at the very bottom of the pyramid in the hierarchy of needs. Like, human connection is a need, and like, you won't die if you don't have it unless you're like a baby.
Yeah, but I guess it, like, and that's interesting to think about how I think polyamorous communities and like BDSM communities like tend to be people that have more money, more disposable income to like travel to these conventions, to like buy these things, to like invest in books. And
it's really hard to find people who. Yeah, that is part of the process of just like branching out and looking for people that have like this thing with you in common. It's really hard to find that.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about, some people just wake up and work 12 hours a day to like support their family, and they do it all over again. Like that, those are their needs.
I don't think they're happy though.
Needs.
A lot of the time.
I don't know. Guatemalans, in my experience, are pretty happy.
I've never been to Guatemala, so yeah. I've also, like, you're more cultured in that way, because I've never been outside the country except for, like, Canada, so.
Oh, yeah.
Never left North America.
It's always just, like, a collision of realities when I come back from Central America in particular, like, back to the Northwest. And
interesting thing, though, is that, like, a lot of indigenous groups throughout the world are egalitarian and non-monogamous, and they're not rich. And like, they don't have like support groups? Well, they don't need them because they're not living in a society that stigmatizes it. They're living in a society that's just the way it's always been. Mm-hmm. So it's really, the reason that I created that group was because I was in a relationship where I was trying to adapt to the needs of the other person by opening it up and like trying to lift the shame too from this other person. And I was having a hard time figuring it all out. And so I needed to find other people that were experiencing it. So I created a group that I was hoping would benefit other people too. And not
Is it
just
still
me.
happening?
It is. I'm not part of it, but yeah.
You created a thing and then left?
Yeah, I do that. I've done that a lot in my life.
I hear that.
I might leave. I might not run the conditioning camp forever, but it'll keep going. Like, I probably can already tell you who would be running it. Like, but I'm going to probably keep doing that for a long time.
You're a catalyst.
Yeah.
You're a cardinal. Are you a cardinal sign?
I don't know. I don't know what that means.
What's your sign?
I'm a Capricorn, and my moon is Gemini.
Cardinal and mutable. So you start things and then you adapt them, but you don't necessarily sustain them because that's fixed.
Whenever I'm passionate about
signs.
something, I just want to, like, bring as many people together to, like, make it. I mean, it's when I get really into something, I kind of obsess over it, and then I become like, so it becomes like the central focus of my life, and everything else is designed around it, and then I don't want to be alone in it, so I, like, find other people and, like, get them into it, or I find people who have never experienced it, or whatever, or people who already are into it, and then, like, bring people together around it. And
then you get, like, depressed and leave.
Or there's, like, a catastrophic event in my life.
Yeah, that's like a hypomanic. I'm similar.
I
get very hyper focused on something. I get very excited about it, and you just flow. You know what I mean?
My father was bipolar. Like,
yeah,
my father actually ended up killing himself, and I think, like,
trigger warning: suicide.
In the last
suicide,
year,
domestic violence, and other such. Trigger warning at the beginning of the podcast.
By, well, I don't know. I haven't had issues.
That's a whole other podcast of trigger warnings.
If you talk about, if you listen to my podcast, I've talked about, like, most of these things already. But no, I'm starting to, like, come to terms with the reality that it's very likely that I have inherited some genetic predisposition to being bipolar.
It's just a word.
I know, but it's a word that describes a thing that I experience. So where's the antics? Where's the insanity?
It's Sunday.
Are you all business?
I'm super business right now.
You're not fun and games. This is very serious.
Well, I live with children. I live with 4 children, 3 to 6 years old. So there's plenty of playtime and make-believe. I also think that in a certain way, like, branding and creating an identity for your business is there's all these different narratives that you can kind of play around with and follow. And, like, Love Cascadia, which is my kind of event planning promoter company that I'm developing right now, is very much about telling stories through these productions.
Like, what's it called?
Love Cascadia.
Sweet.
Yeah, we've done 2 events, and I'm looking for a venue right now for Deep House Bellingham. So I'm gonna find a location for that. I'm looking for
Bellingham or outside?
In Bellingham. Yeah, I'm looking for something that's like kind of a restaurant lounge type space, but that can also have music that's not all in your face dubstep.
Yeah.
Not that there's totally a place for that. But I'm trying to feel a different kind of niche with Deep House Bellingham. So yeah, I feel like there's
big of a venue. Sorry, not cutting you off. I want to be helpful.
Intimate.
You should talk to fucking Aaron at Red Rum.
You know, I've thought about that
because it's pretty intimate and it's a restaurant.
It is intimate. It does have. They have a sound system, so we wouldn't have to lug our sound system in there. My only thing about Red Rum is it just doesn't look like it's all blacked out windows, and it looks kind of like what's going on in there
from the outside.
From the outside, yeah. So I'm like, I don't know if Deep House Bellingham is quite that like underground kind of like feeling. Like I'm thinking more like the honeymoon type of like, there's an open air side to it. Like you're walking by and you like see inside, you're like, ooh, that looks like people are having a good time, building community around that. There's like some kind of wall there.
You should talk to the local, because like I was in there and I was thinking it would be so cool if they actually had event like music there sometimes, because I love the lighting there. It's like not too dark, not too bright. Like,
you like those neon beer lights?
No, they don't. I don't think
the local.
The local, yeah.
Next to, I'm thinking the annex room.
No, the annex room is part of the local.
Adjacent to the local.
But yeah, they're connected. They're the same business.
Yeah, we were actually just in there.
But like they have like burlap up on the ceiling, because I was looking around and they have like acoustic clouds on the wall and shit. And I'm like, why? Do they play music in here? Like,
I feel like it probably helps dampen the sound, although it's pretty loud in there, at least where we were sitting. Another thought was Asland, but they're just a little too, I don't know, I don't like that glass on all sides kind of thing. Wander.
Oh my god, it would be so cool to do it at Stone's Throw.
I've never been there.
It's pretty small, it's intimate. There's like a whole backyard garden, or
is that next to Satori?
No, that's Gruff. But no, it's not really a backyard, but it's like you go in the back, so it's all made out of shipping containers, the whole entire place.
So it's a big tin can.
Well, a whole bunch of them stacked, and it's like, and there's like a deck upstairs, like a balcony, and then there's like a fire pit in the back, and they have like sails hanging up, so there's like trees hanging over. It feels like you're in someone's backyard sitting around a fire pit. Like,
that's cool. That could be I want cozy, you know. I'm just noticing Bellingham is going this like industrial modern direction with a lot of the new businesses that are popping up, and
this kind of just feels
I want like temple bar, you know what I mean, like kind of quiet, dark, like there's a, you know, comfy couches kind of thing, and it's all very like
back in the day. How long have you been in Bellingham?
2006.
Yeah, I think so back in the day when I was in like high school, and before that even, like in the 90s, we had a place called Stewart's Coffee House. I
remember Stewart's.
You do?
Stewart's was still around, yeah.
And there was like couches and like...
Yeah, they had like poetry night there, right? Oh yeah. Man, you know, Red Rum used to be like an old jazz club.
Yeah, the like Callaloo.
No, before...
Or no, the Callaloo was somewhere else.
Callaloo was at Studio, or the Shakedown. Yeah.
No, there was a place called like something that sounded like Callaloo, and it was a jazz club. And it was like, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I caught the tail end of when Bellingham had like good music, you know, where there was like local bands that like people would go out to see, and they would just pack the buff.
The Wild Buffalo was so much better back in the day. It was like blues and like there was all this, there was like open mic night and shit, and now it's just like,
it's a lot of DJs.
Well, like when because I feel, didn't the Royal shut down for a while? Or no, it was
the Beaver?
No, the Underground. They were there, and then they weren't, and now they're there again. But during the time that they weren't, like when they shut down, the whole like douchebag college scene from the Underground went to the Buffalo, and that's when the Buffalo started having 90s night.
Oh.
Yeah, and now there's just like...
And now there's 90s night at the Buffalo.
This is only fucking important to people from Bellingham. It's probably not even important to them.
Yeah. That was kind of what was happening last night. There was like... Well, it was kind of a variety show at Studio B, and then the Royal had kind of like a top 40 DJ, but... I mean, I was in Studio B, and there was like small crowds of people that would come in, and they're like, what the fuck? And then they left. And then I went over to the Royal, and I was like, holy crap, like everybody's here. Everyone's like at the Royal, the Underground, and probably like Rumors, depending on if there's something going on at the Buffalo. But I'm like, there's 90,000 people in this town, and around Halloween, like they're all downtown. So it's not like there's not people around that are of age that can go to things. I think it's just like kind of interesting to see like how Bellingham is growing in its creative capacity as it becomes more developed, as it becomes more colonized, I guess, by people from Seattle moving out of the city because of rising cost of housing, which is totally happening here in Bellingham. So
that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Dude, you know what's funny is, so when I was working for the tree service, I was working with John, who you know, and I was talking to John, and I was like, I don't know why, but for some reason I had it in my head that you were Guatemalan, of like Guatemalan ethnicity, and so I was talking to him, and I was like, no, my friend Zoe says she knows you, she's like Guatemalan chick, like, and then he's like, really, Zoe? I thought she was Mongolian. Where's
my background?
Yeah.
So on my dad's side of the family, we're Hazara, but if you know, so they're like a minority ethnic group in Afghanistan who have lineage, like Mongolian lineage.
Okay.
So they're a little more Asian looking.
Here's what's trippy about this, okay? So like, John goes, next time you see her, say, there's something Mongolian looking about you. Because like, I was like, I didn't know she was Mongolian. Maybe she's Mongolian too. So then like, I saw you and I said that, and you're like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, I don't know why I thought you were Guatemalan. During the time that me and you weren't talking, like last summer, I met someone on Tinder who I actually went and I spent time with, and really fucking, I fell for it pretty quickly.
Oh.
It didn't work out, unfortunately. Like, we're still friends and everything. Her name was Zoe. It was spelled a little differently. And she actually knows John. And, like, probably, I think, has spent probably more time with John than you. And she's Mongolian. And I think that the whole time, John was thinking of her.
Oh. Huh.
Such a trip, dude. And I was like, oh my God, like, that's so weird. But no, it was such a trip because I was talking to her and she told me like who her dad was and that he's Mongolian. And I was like, oh yeah, I met your dad before. And we were talking later on, like we were walking on this trail, and I was like, yeah, this dude I used to work with doing the tree work, like John, I was telling stories and stuff. And she's like, oh yeah, I know John. And then like I said his last name. I don't want to say it on here. I just don't, because I don't even want to say her name on here. But your name is Zoe, so it's no fucking secret. But
it's such a small town.
I know. That's why
I didn't even want to like drop like the names of venues and like my opinions about them, because it's like I don't know they're probably not listening.
But probably not. I don't know. But no, dude, that just tripped me out. I was like, fuck, none of us like. So now you think that John told me like you're Mongolian. I was like, who was John thinking about? Like, it's just trippy that in this such a small place, like how many Mongolian people do you meet? And how many Mongolian people named Zoe?
Yeah, right.
And how many of them know
I know
John?
Like one Mongolian lady, but I think her name's like Lynn or something. I'm going to use the wash.
Okay, so what do you love?
What do I love?
Yeah.
It's a very strange question. How do you define love?
No, I'm asking you.
How I define love?
Yeah, well, just what do you love, and then what does that mean, and what does it feel like, and is it people? Are there people specifically, or like things like?
See, I think we got to define love.
Go for it.
Well, when you ask that, what is typically your?
I left it open to interpretation.
Okay, so balls in my court.
Yeah.
How I define love.
Yeah, people listen to anyone who listens to this podcast at this point probably has a decent idea of what I think about love.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of your podcasts.
Which ones?
I just remember one was like, it was one of your earlier podcasts, and you were like, how do you define, or what do you like? I want to say what gets you off, but that's like, I feel like that has a lot of sexual connotations, but it's like what like amps you up, you know what I mean? Like, what are you passionate about?
Like, who was I talking to?
Some guy.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how you label your podcasts now, but I think back then they were like conversation with blank.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the topic of your...
I still don't really do that.
Yeah, I feel like I would remember it if it was labeled something, like, because then I would be like, that was the theme of that whole thing. But obviously we've covered a lot of themes in this podcast. But I feel like it's all kind of like come back around. It's been this nice kind of mandala of thoughts.
And like, I want to do more like kind of listing off the things that we talk about in the blurbs and stuff. It's just that we usually talk about so much stuff in these episodes, and I spend so much time already editing them and stuff, to listen to them at the end after everything and listen to it all with a paper and a pen and like write down the things would just be like...
Yeah. Do you have, I don't know, I teach yoga online through Zoom, the Zoom platform, and they have like a write out audio. So I don't know if your stuff is able to do that, but that might be helpful for just for getting like the text content of the conversations. You could just like hit record in Zoom, and then all of the audio from the different parties will be...
It transcribes it?
Yeah, it transcribes it.
But what about all the pauses and the like...
That'll be in there. But you could like, you know, there's probably like snippets of good content that's unadulterated by likes and ums.
Yeah.
But I'm avoiding answering your question.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like love...
Is there a reason you're avoiding it?
I just feel like I have a maybe not very popular or not a commonly accepted definition of love. Like, I feel like love is like an energy as opposed to like a state of mind or like a desire for something. Because I feel like we kind of, like, especially in English, we don't have a lot of words. We don't have as many words as some languages, like in Spanish. There's a lot of different ways to say that you love something.
Or Greek, there's different kinds of love.
Yeah, so I'm like, well, there's things that I'm passionate about. There's things that are challenging, but I feel a sense of loyalty to. I think that's also another like form of love. It's like, I don't really get along with this person, but I have this long-standing relationship and I really care about their well-being.
That's a passion for the relationship.
And I want to be supportive in ways that speak to them and also don't burn me out. I mean, that's a very complex like situation there, but I would describe that overarching relationship as love.
That's like compassion, because like compassion means to suffer with, and passion means to suffer. Passion means to suffer, that's what it means. And compassion means to suffer with. So like compassion, being willing to suffer with that person because...
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it kind of gets to what is your love language, you know, so like an act of service, words of affirmation, quality time, touch, and I think there's like one other one that I'm forgetting. I probably don't know the other one because it's not one that I...
Wait, you said words of affirmation, acts of service, quality time, physical touch, and gifts.
Gifts, yes. I was like, there's one that I'm forgetting because I do not resonate with it whatsoever. Like, I don't give gifts. I'm just like, you got me something that's really nice.
Sometimes I like undervalue my own love language so much that I want to do more than I already am when I love someone, and then I'm like, well, what more can I do? And then I'm like, well, I can go and like spend a lot of time trying to find the perfect gift for this person. And that's usually when that happens, is like when I feel like I'm just like not... I want them to know how fucking special they are to me, and it doesn't...
But is that for you or for their benefit?
Well, when is altruism not about you two? When is loving someone, when is like, it's always about both people. No matter how...
Well, you're involved, but when you say it's about, is the focal point and your motivation self-driven, I guess? Like,
I mean, I think it always is, no matter what. Like, we are self-driving things. Like, if I love someone, it's supposed to be not about needing or wanting or taking, but about like them feeling loved, right? And I want them to feel loved because I feel like they deserve to feel loved. And
when you feel loved, do you mean like, what do you mean? Like,
feel like they belong, feel accepted.
So sense of belonging, sense of value, probably like sense of
acceptance,
validation,
and like feeling at home with someone, or just
a sense of ease, feeling comfort, feeling like there's
safe.
A safety of being vulnerable,
feeling held, really, like just that you it's a feeling of like being cared for, and like that. if I want someone to feel like that, even if it's coming from a place of selflessness, I want them to feel that. So it is still about me, no matter what. If I'm going out of my way to do that for someone, that
your
doesn't...
wish for another person.
Yeah, and it doesn't make it not love. It just doesn't remove my satisfaction from the equation. Like, I still feel satisfied knowing that this person feels that way.
And that's like kind of a natural consequence of goodwill. Or so as I've experienced it. I'm like, this benefits me because I value my own happiness and well-being. And when I am interacting with others in a way that's loving, compassionate, patient, caring, that in turn benefits me. That's not my motivation. It's more, I feel like love, again, for me is like an energy, it's like a force. And it always, for me, love just exists. It's not necessarily something that like I cultivate. It's just, it is there, and people are love. And love is always present if you can allow it to be present. And I think a lot of our politics, our interpersonal dynamics, our histories, like conflate that reality that we all exist in love.
Yeah, I think for me that makes me think of like my ideas about ego and intimacy. When I connect with people, I usually connect in a deeper way than I think is typical. Like, I connect really quickly with people, and we share things that maybe wouldn't share with just anybody. And I think what happens is like we have like preconceived ideas about the protocol of like connecting with people and what's acceptable or appropriate and what's not. And when we get rid of that and we just acknowledge who we are and what we feel and allow the other, and like make space and respect what the other person is, who they are and how they feel as well, then the result of that is inevitably going to be that love is allowed to happen. Like, that love that you say is always there if it's allowed to be. I don't know if that's the words you used, but like, I feel like that's what happens. Like, intimacy is what happens because when we stop identifying with ourselves as different than everything else around us and the ego starts to fade away, all that's left is the connection. Is this pervasive like energy that connects us all, or this like state of existence that we can all relate to. The things that also block that are not just like our preconceived ideas about what's okay and the appropriate ways of relating to each other, but also like the inability to experience somebody else's suffering. So like, say I am like hanging out and somebody is having like a panic attack, or say I'm at the store and there's like somebody who's suffering from some kind of psychosis, and I get really uncomfortable and I just walk away. If I'm not paying attention, I might have some kind of implicit bias that I'm not aware of. If I'm not paying attention to my response to that person, and I'm not like being conscious of the thoughts that I'm having about them and shit, I might judge them subconsciously without even knowing it, and being like, well, that's an unsafe person. I don't like, that person's fucked up. I don't know, that person's got something wrong with them, whatever. Like, not even questioning like what is actually happening there and how much I actually have in common with that person, and that we're all fucking suffering, and that by me being here near this person, I don't know, like that it's not necessarily a threat. I guess that's not really the greatest example either, but like I'm just trying to think of an example of a time when I might see somebody else's suffering or somebody else's experience and differentiate myself from them because of what they're experiencing, and not recognize that like what they're experiencing is something that I can actually relate to if I just like stop making these judgments and like discernments about like how different I am from that person. Like, when we all fucking suffer, we all have our own perception, and like those perceptions aren't always congruent with each other, and like,
so it's all kind of a matter of what your internal experience is in that moment.
I think
if you're walking by a person on this, side of the street in destitution, like laying in a pile of their own vomit and garbage, and you're like you could have a myriad of internal reactions to that, and thoughts about them and thoughts about yourself that can go in all sorts of different directions. And I think for me,
tell stories about how that person got there. Even.
Yeah. And I think like the parting of all of that, I mean, even the things that are more like positive and like affirming to like maybe that person's story, it's like in that moment, this is the reality that person is in, and this is like the 3D reality. It's like there's a person laying on the pavement and it looks like there's like vomit next to them. And that's it. That's a 3D inarguable observation. Whatever happened before now for them to get there, whatever has been happening with me that day in order for me to be in this particular moment, in this particular time, like this just is.
And the truth is, like, either of us could easily end up in that situation. I mean, like, neither one of us are immune to the susceptibility to become addicted to something. So maybe that person is addicted to something. Who knows? Maybe that person is where they are and experiencing what they're experiencing because of addiction. That's just one fucking like story that I could tell myself.
One narrative, yeah.
Right? But none of us are not susceptible to that. Like all of us could fall into that. Anything could happen. Like, who knows what happened? Who fucking knows? The point is that person's still a person, regardless of what the narrative is, regardless of what the story is about how they got there or what they're experiencing, even if they brought that all upon themselves, which
it's not to say that you don't bring suffering upon yourself.
No, I think we always are bringing suffering upon ourselves, but like, there's a lot more happening than we have control over a lot of the time also. And even the way that we respond to the things that happen in our lives, we only have the tools that we have. Like, so if goes back to this fucking conversation that I have almost every episode about free will versus determinism.
I mean, I thought we were talking about what I love.
No, totally. We can't, yeah.
To digress.
No, totally. But no, we're talking about defining love in general, but yeah. I want to know what you love.
Yeah, so I guess like based on my definition, it's not so much of the egolessness of it, you know? So I being the subject of that question and love being a verb, an act, as opposed to feeling like love just exists. And so therefore, like, I mean, from a linguistic standpoint, it's like, well, I love my family, I love my friends, I love, you know, the ability to access many different ways of thinking and culture, like through this great thing called the internet and social media. But all of those relationships, all of that love, like has a lot of dimensions to it. So yeah, I guess that would be, that's my summation.
Okay.
I guess.
I have to pee again. So what does it mean to be loved? And what invites you to feel that way?
What does it mean?
Or to experience it?
How do I experience when someone loves me?
Like what does it mean? Is it, so being that love is just a thing that exists, so
just a thing.
Well, you were saying that love is a thing that exists, not like so much a verb.
Yeah, I feel like it's a force. It's like fire.
Okay, so it's like it's like a force of nature, kind of. Well, what is it possible to be loved then?
I don't know.
Do you feel loved ever?
Yeah.
So what invites you to have that experience? And yeah.
I feel like love is expressed in a lot of different ways. I mean, just like my little friend who's like 6, you know, he'll like come upstairs and he's like, what are you doing on the MIDI controller or whatever? It's like, oh, let's do this, you know, and I'll show him how to like do the thing. We'll record a little track in Ableton and he's like, oh, that's so cool. I'm like, that's love, you know? But it's like, what is it about that?
Yeah.
It's all of it together. You know what I mean? It's my longer standing relationship with this kid. The fact that, you know, he's interested in these kinds of things, the fact that I'm sharing it with him, my whole experience with music production up until this point, just being a newbie myself, and then like sharing that what very little I know with a very small person.
Well, like, yeah, and like your intention behind it, and like why you invest that time and energy, like, is part of the love, I think. But and then for him, the intention isn't even there consciously, probably. Like, he's just experiencing.
Yeah, he's just interested. And he also, I mean, like, I think there's an aspect of like feeling safe, you know, like, I'm gonna go find Zoe in the house and see what she's doing. Yeah. So I think it's like, in that moment, I feel like there's a physiological response, you know? So it's like, I'm feeling there's probably like dopamine happening. There's probably all sorts of like, you know, hormonal things happening. Like when you have a small child like sitting in your lap and you're showing them how to do something, you know what I mean? It's not the same thing as like being on the computer responding to emails all day. So yeah, I feel like that's an experience of love that I have had. And I think that is, if I feel like I'm much more like an act of service kind of person as it relates to my love language. So if somebody's, you know, I came home and like I was in a rush and I left a couple dishes in the sink and my roommate did them, and I'm just like, oh my God, like that, like, you know, it's the energy expenditure of my life. So like when I think about like everything that goes out, you know, I'm taking care of a lot of people, you know, with all 4 of my jobs or whatever. So when that comes back around to me, when somebody does something for me, I mean, and even if it's just like joy, even if it's just like sharing joy, like the children sharing the joy of some play thing that they're doing, like that's an energy exchange, you know, that fills me.
Do you get that when you're playing shows?
Yes, and I have to, that's an active cultivation, I feel like, typically, in leading up to performing. I think that there's this element of like ego that really like colors that experience for me. I'm like, who am I when I'm performing? Because it feels very different than, you know, I'm hanging out in my sweatpants, like just playing guitar, or I'm like in front of, you know, 100, 200 people, whatever. And that energy exchange that happens in those like larger groups where you're like curating an experience for another person. But also you know, and I think this is where I diverge in regards to my DJing persona, DJ personality, like the purpose behind that. Like, I don't like being on a stage, like literally elevated on a platform in front of people. You're
diverging, but like, do you even use your real last name at all anymore? Or your former last name? I don't even know if that's...
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's my legal last name.
Do you use it, like, at all, other than for legal purposes?
At this point, no.
So you haven't, like, really... Like, you're still... you're not totally divergent.
Well, the thing about my last name, too, is it's my adopted last name. You know? That wasn't my last name until I was, like, 11.
Warrior wasn't my last name until I became a father.
Yeah.
So...
Well, there you go. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of DJs that have, you know, epic soundscape, or it's not a human name, you know, and that's part of their identity as a performer. And I'm like, I want it to be, it's like self-creation, you know, it's like, I am still Zoie. Mizuna was like an Instagram handle that when I made my Instagram back in, I don't know, I was a late bloomer to most platforms of social media. I've only got like 40 posts or something on my Instagram, but I was just like, I was working on a farm at the time, out near Nugent's Corner. And I was, you know, she had like a really fancy like salad mix that she grew, and you're in there and like weeding the little microgreens. And she had like Mizuna, she had Mizapuna, tatsoi, like all these like specialty Asian greens. And I was like, Mizuna, it's like spicy, it's like a little sharp along the edges. And I was like, I just like that name. And then when my sister was like showing me how to put the Instagram together, she was like, you need like
do you have a logo?
An alias. I just have like a Z and an M.
You should have an eagle.
I don't know, when you start putting animals on things, like...
Remember that conversation that we had, though?
Oh, yeah. The eagle is like, what's your, like, DJ, persona or something? I was asking you
if you were an animal, what would it be? And you were like, an eagle.
Dancing at the gates of purgatory.
Yeah, you were conjuring. Conjuring darkness.
That's sort of what it feels like. I remember going to see Spangle, a Spangle DJ set at the Showbox down in Seattle, like many years ago. And I just remember like I was like up on this like platform in the back of the venue, and I was like kind of eye level with the performers, so you could like see down, like the bar was over here and then like the sea of people, and just like hearing this electronic music in this really dark, like the Showbox is pretty dark. And it's just like, this is hell. I mean, it was great. It was really fun. Like people felt it. I felt it. I loved Spangle, but there's a darkness to it, you know? And I just think about like, you know, going from that life of being with the dirt, you know, weeding the Mizuna, you know, on the farm, to like, all of a sudden I got a box of like cables shipped to me from like China. And now like right now I'm like borrowing a pair of CDJs from a friend, and like there's these huge, massive like pieces of metal that, you know, all of which was like blown out of a mountain somewhere and then like shipped across the ocean, where it was constructed in some factory by like some underpaid labor. And then, you know, someone purchased that in like a Western country for a premium price, and then it got posted to this other it's just like the path to which this has gotten to me. Like I think a lot about with this more digital turn my life has taken. I mean, even with branding, like spending all this time on social media, like on the internet, like in the DAW, you know, you're like really in the machine, you're really interacting. Like I interact way more with machines. I touch machines more than I touch people.
Dude, like I said, I came out of a pretty shitty depression, like one of the deepest fucking depressions I've ever been in recently. And like a huge part of it was, I would say that in no other time in my life have I been so isolated from people. Like the amount of time I spend in conversations on podcasts, and then like the time that I spend in the gym, it's like the only time that I'm around people. And there was like 6 months where most days, like on weekends, I never was around people, and then on weekdays I was basically awake 14 to 16 hours a day and alone for 6 months. And it was just like, oh, dude, I've never experienced that before. And I was connecting with fucking I was on my computer editing, and it's just like this little box of, like with Audacity, it's a gray, and like this little box of gray like becomes like
your world. This is the landscape of your life.
And now I'm using Adobe Audition, which is black. And I'm like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, that is not good.
And you can't change you can't change it. Yeah.
Like, you should be able to, but like, even then, still, like, there's a huge difference between being able to change this little box that you're staring into for hours and like going outside.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know so Facebook was down, I think last week on Wednesday for like a historical amount of time, like 24, 22 hours, something like that. Yeah. And everybody was like blowing up Twitter.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, everyone was blowing up Twitter, and there was all these like funny memes coming out. Like there was this one where this guy's like sitting on a bench, like looking at some ducks like in a pond, and he's like looking so sad. He's like, my life now that there's no Facebook or something like that. And I'm like, man, we're all being freaking coded. You know, and this is like, I mean, I feel it. I feel the addictive nature of all of those platforms. Like I feel it in my body when I'm on there and I see likes and I see comments and getting more followers, or even like the negative side of that, where you put something out there and you're like, holy crap, I could get some serious backlash from that. I don't know if you've experienced internet mobs before, but I mean, as someone who's saying things and putting it out there, it's
I haven't actually experienced that as a response to my podcast, but
yet.
And I will, and I don't really care.
Do you
it's okay.
So I follow Sam Harris's I guess it's called Making Sense.
Like it used to be Sam Harris Jordan Peterson arguments and shit.
I mean, he has a lot of different people on that show, but I mean, one of the things that I like about it is like, he's like, I'm going to say what I feel. I'm going to have like people on here that are maybe controversial and have like honest conversations with them, ask them the hard questions. They're going to ask me the hard questions, and leaving nuance to all that, you know, being like, I don't know the answer to that. it could be this, it could be that. But just to see, like, to be at that caliber and then have, you know, an article come out in New York Times that's like talking shit about you.
Yeah.
And you're like, what the heck? Like, I invited that guy who wrote that article onto the show and he didn't like come and talk to me. You know, and then it's like your identity and like, I mean, I don't even understand like that, what that caliber looks like. I feel like I've experienced it somewhat just as a DJ in Bellingham, navigating the politics around like, oh, who's talking to who's not booking who, or like, this is like, we work mostly with this venue, or like these promoters, or like whatever. There's all these politics.
That's going to be like really intense for me if it ever does reach that point, because I don't know about any of those other people like Sam Harris and stuff, but I don't know if they have like a stage persona, or like they have like a I
mean, he goes on like speaking tours.
Yeah, but I mean, even then, like, I don't know if he's kind of created a separate persona for himself when he's doing that. But like, when I'm on here, my number one goal is to not have a filter. It's a lot of things, but like, I don't want it to filter out any content. So like, when I'm talking to someone, I want to filter my process, but not my content. Like, I want to get the ideas across, but I want to do it in a way using a process of communication that is like facilitating a feeling of safety and receptiveness, because that's like, what I have to say is only part of the communication. The other part of the communication is the other person hearing it, and actually hearing it. And because everything, whenever I say something to you, you have to abstract what I'm saying and try to understand it, and you're probably going to understand it in a way that's totally different. It's like describing a color to a blind person, because you have your own idea. Like, have you ever thought about that? Like, what if like what I see as the color blue is actually like,
I was just talking to somebody about this. Like,
right?
how do we know that it's
like, when you think about
color?
The color blue, like, you actually see what I see as the color green, but we don't know the difference because our whole lives that's what it's been. The only way we would ever know that is if at one point in one of our lives our perception of color changed, and then it would be like, oh, because we have this like reference point. But
well, I think it's like frequencies of like light frequencies.
Yeah, but how our brain interprets it could change. Like, we could have some kind of event that changes the way we interpret it, like color blindness that we haven't always had. And then I would notice,
part of the brain that's like receiving the information like from your lens of your eye.
Yeah. So, or yeah, at any point between the eye and the brain.
Well, that's like, yeah, I mean, there was a TED Talk on that, how they're like, you're totally hallucinating like 90% of your reality.
Yeah. Well, you know,
we just haven't agreed upon hallucination in our culture.
There was, when I was learning, when I went through this life coaching program, and one of the things that I learned is that 1/200th of the information that actually makes its way like through your eyes and through the optic chiasm, I think is how you pronounce it, like once it reaches your amygdala, like in that process, only 1/200th of the actual information comes through. And then like,
that's why when you're tripping on acid and stuff, you see a lot more shit.
Yeah, because there's the what's it called, I forget what it's called. There's this like inhibitory thing in your brain that when you're taking in information, you're deleting, distorting, you're decreasing the amount of information that you're taking in. You're prioritizing what's important and what's not, and you're not seeing everything. But
what is this called?
I forget. Hold on, let me pause this while I Google it. Well, or unless you want to keep talking and entertain everyone.
Well, I was just going to say, I like that because I think that has a lot to do, and my sense is that it's probably like hyperactive when you're in like a fight or flight response. It's like your awareness of like less important functions becomes inhibited for survival mechanisms. Like, you need to be able to run, you need to be able to like engage your muscles, you need to be not digesting and, you know, thinking about the cat that's like walking by. So I think like meditation kind of helps you come more into that like prefrontal, like, hey, let's look at everything from like a 360 instead of this very small, potentially insignificant threat that I'm like blowing up to be. I mean, and that's, yeah. I feel like that's kind of society in general is running on this kind of acute low grade sense of anxiety and like energetic anemia. You know,
I've talked about this in my podcast. There's a neuroscientist who was on here at one point. And God, I really wish I could remember the name. It's a 3-letter acronym for the... Dude, I knew this like just a couple months ago. But like... but yeah, like when you do psychedelics, it opens up... You open up your mind to you're not deleting and distorting and prioritizing so much. You're taking in a lot more information. And you're thinking about shit that you normally wouldn't think about too. And you're just... It's interesting, like, you know how... So, when we dream, there's different theories on what happens when we dream, but part of it is that, like, we stop taking in stimulus from outside of our bodies. Like, we stop using the five senses to take in information, and we get, like, random electrical impulses from our brainstem, and those impulses go up and into different parts of our brains, and then our like neocortical brain tries to make sense of it by telling a story and creating a narrative around it and like connecting the dots, and like that's what dreaming is. Well, that's one theory on what dreaming is. And I feel like when we're doing that when we're awake too, we're just taking in pieces of information from our 5 senses, and we're like connecting the dots about what all that is and trying to make sense of it. But when you're taking in that much more information, the whole fucking narrative is like, it's crazy. Like, that's why bad trips happen, because you're taking in all this fucking information and you have to be really creative about what it all fucking means. Anyway, I feel like, and that's what, I mean, I don't know this. This is just an idea, but I think that's how shamanism works. Is like, shamanism is about learning to be creative with reality, learning to be creative with your perception. And the more creative you are, the different, like, so a huge part of, like, in psychology, there's explanatory style, which is like how you pretty much determines whether or not you're pessimistic or optimistic. I'm trying to talk as fast as I'm thinking. It's not working. It's how you are either pessimistic or optimistic. How you explain the events that happen in your life. Yeah. And how you explain your current state in life.
If it's like if there's a positive spin or a negative spin on it.
Yeah, and usually that has to do with how much responsibility you take. So like, is this because of something I did, or is it because of other circumstances? Like, a lot of it has to do with your locus of control. And so, while it's really important to have an internal locus of control, if you're taking responsibility for something you had no control over, it's really easy to be really fucking hard on yourself for something that, like, you really shouldn't be so hard on yourself. And vice versa. If there's something that you should be taking responsibility for, and you're blaming it on other things, like, then it's not going to help you change your situation. But people who are more pessimistic tend to have a higher, like, susceptibility to, like, depression. People who are optimistic don't. But the optimists will usually do whatever explanatory style makes them feel better about life. Like, so
it's interesting to think about that those are like our only 2 options. It's like, it's either my fault or it's somebody else's fault.
Well, that's just how it's been categorized in that little school of thought in psychology. But like, when I think about shamanism, I think what you're doing is you're practicing explaining shit to yourself in a way more creative way than the average person would. You're like learning to interpret and perceive things in a totally fucking creative way. Like, it's kind of like the whole, like, manifestation idea of, like, believing that something can happen and therefore you find it. It's like the whole, like, if I am thinking about buying a green Jeep, then every day when I go driving, I'm going to notice all the green Jeeps. It's not that there's more green Jeeps out there. I'm not creating those green Jeeps with my mind, but I'm looking for them.
But there could also be more green Jeeps that day.
There could have been, totally. The fact is, I wouldn't have noticed them if I wasn't
preparing my mind to notice them.
But have you ever had like things come into your life that you're not thinking about, and then it comes to you in a different way?
I think I know what you're talking about. You know what's weird though? Like, there's weird shit that happens. Like, you know when you learn about, say, have you ever heard a saying that you've never heard in your life, and then that same week, like 3 people say it? Is that because it's becoming a popular saying in that area, and so more people are saying it, or is it because like sometimes it's like a really weird little thing that like I've never heard anyone else say, but I just heard it 3 times that week.
Yeah,
it's so fucking weird how that happens.
Yeah, so I go pretty regularly to this gym, and I come in about the same time. It's the same people. You know, you have like many data points of like what the scene is when you like arrive at the gym, and this happened to be the day that a good friend of mine had like filed for like her divorce paperwork, and was talking a lot about divorce that day, and yeah, just another friend had like divorce was in the air, I guess. So I come to the gym, and the 2 more advanced students that are usually there earlier than everyone, I come in and they're talking about divorce. And I'm like, I've never heard you guys talk about like relationship stuff, like ever, A. And B, you're also talking about something that I've been thinking a lot about today. So I'm like, this is just random. But, you know, the brain is putting together a pattern. You're like, oh, this, and this.
And then how would that affect you if you were in a marriage and you were going through a really stressful time in your marriage? How would that affect you? And what decisions would you make? Yep. Because I mean, like, that's, in my opinion, dude, that's magic. That is magic. And when people get together and do that together, and they're conscious of it, especially when they're conscious of it, and they're designing the things that they're going to be thinking about and putting energy into and shit, like, they're doing magic together. You're conjuring something. Like, you're conjuring a possibility, and then you're feeding that possibility. Like,
well, you're changing a mind.
Multiple minds and multiple interrelational bodies between the people.
And yeah, and that's where I feel like you can,
and there's like an identity to every community, and then the identity of the community changes too. Like,
and it's also something that can be commodified, and I feel like that's what is happening with social media and our interactions on the internet, is that they're like, these algorithms know what we're searching, they know what we're thinking about, because every time we have a thought, we go in there and we interact with the machine.
When you say commodified, I think if you can commodify it, you can commercialize it.
Well, what I mean commodify is like when I think about Facebook and like their advertisements, it's like probably one day you'll have like a paid Facebook or like a paid Instagram where
that's why I went directly to commercialized.
How you won't have to, it's like you have to pay for space in your mind to be creative, as opposed to being like fed something. Because once you see an image, it's like you can't unsee that image. And you know, people that run these like multi-million-dollar marketing firms, like they understand the psychology. They understand the psychology of it all. And they understand that it's like, well, we know that this person, I mean, they did a study on this with like a grocery store. This is like probably one of the first like social media experiments where you had a grocery card, and basically like your name and information is attached to this card that you put your number in the pin pad, and you get whatever % off or whatever. You're like, that sounds like a great deal. Like this grocery store is really concerned about me and my ability to pay for, because they're giving me a discount. And it's like, no, they're actually like paying you for your information and the frequency at which you buy things. Like they were able to predict, like a couple weeks before, a woman knew she was pregnant with like 90% accuracy based on her shopping patterns. So if they're able to predict
this is
to 90%,
you're describing religion verbatim. Like, this is church that you're talking about. Like, that's how religion works.
Oh, like institutions of control.
Yeah. And, like, it's turned into a commodity. It's something that you need, that you benefit from.
And that we have.
And you're coming
and we
together.
Can sell to you.
Multiple minds are coming together and putting energy into this thing that makes them feel better about the future and creates possibilities and like creates a vision that is shared and everyone's going towards it, and you're feeding into it and you're putting money into it and they're making shit tons of money. And Joel Osteen.
Joel Hosting?
Joel Osteen.
Is that a...
Oh, he's like a fucking, like, he's
Okay, so Joel Osteen is like he's one of
like
those
the big church guys.
Benny Hinn. Yeah, so just Joel Osteen, I'm just Googling his, there's this picture you gotta see, I've seen online.
Does he get all manic and like talk in front of people? I feel like
I don't know about manic, but he does talks. I mean, that's how what he's famous for. He does like, I know he's on YouTube now, but I think he used to just have a radio, like a gospel sermon, whatever you call it. But yeah, there's Joel Osteen's church.
Are people like falling out into the aisles crying and gyrating like, from the Spirit?
You're talking
Holy
about
Spirit?
Like what's it called? Charismatic fucking. So those televangelists back in the 90s that were on TV all the time, like, and people were like being attacked by demons, and like they were like putting their hands on them and blessing them, and they were like going into convulsions and shit. Yeah, like I don't know if they do that on this show. I think people finally realized how ridiculous that was. Anyway, I was just like the whole time you're talking about like. I mean,
this is the same as like when I see like large auditorium, like the sports industrial complex feels very similar in that.
Right. But this guy doesn't pay taxes. He doesn't. This guy, all this money that he's receiving is because the Lord. He's speaking the gospel. He's changing people's lives.
Because they've been able to monetize human psychology.
Right, but that's what happens. That's the next step after commodifying something like human psychology, which is what we're talking about. Like we're talking about being able to manipulate our explanatory style in a way that benefits us, that helps us and creates more possibility for us, so that we can provide a better lives for ourselves, or a better perception, just a perception of life that's more conducive to like success and happiness. And then people getting together to do that with specific goals that they're like tailoring the time that they spend together around. And then like doing that, to me, is magic. That's how magic works. Like we're creating possibilities, and we're bringing shit into existence. We're creatively making things happen. And like,
but are we?
I mean,
how are we? Who gave you the idea to start a podcast?
I wasn't even referring to this podcast, but I feel like we are doing magic right now.
Yeah.
Like that is what we're doing.
But how, like, I guess like what I'm thinking.
They call it radio magic.
Yeah, I guess like what I'm thinking about is like, you know, you've made purchases to help support this idea.
Because I haven't commodified this podcast. It's not a commodity for anybody. Like if it were,
but it's a commodity for somebody. You bought the mics, you bought the,
It's a commodity for me. But the thing is, I mean,
the people like the companies that consumers are creating the gear and the platforms that you're paying a certain. I mean, it's all sales
for sure. I'm just like, I think like you were saying you can commodify magic. I'm saying we can conjure shit. We can make shit, like we can bring ideas to life. We can give ideas space to exist when they didn't before. Like we can put our heads together and have visions together, that those visions have power. And like people who hear this are going to have their own visions. And like, it changes things. But like to commodify it, for this to serve enough of a need, like serve a purpose that is like, or like a utilitarian purpose in people's lives that is fulfilling a great enough need that it becomes a commodity. Like once that happens, the next step is you monetize that and you commercialize it and you make a bunch of fucking money off of it. And
well, that's what I'm saying. It's like we're having a conversation, which I feel like is a very like raw, basic, like human exchange. And we are actually like commodifying it in that like we're feeding sound like through wires into a software that it will later be manipulated, uploaded onto, the vast abyss that is the internet and go to places all over the world. I'm like that process in and of itself for me is a process of commodification. I mean, even just like, and I think what I am referencing is like, how we were once oral traditions and like we were sharing art and we were writing in caves, and that was how we were able to transmute information and history and knowledge to future generations and other cultures. And now we've digitized all that, and through that digitization, we've also created an entire marketplace that can be where, like, our magic, just the magic of having a human exchange and like having ideas together, is now there's a third party that's able to not only understand us better. I mean, this is like a whole conversation around AI, which Sam Harris talks a lot about. And that I get concerned about. I'm just like, I don't know what they're doing, what these algorithms, their intent on collecting all of this data to most likely sell us products, to most likely have a better understanding of, like, you know,
they can change what we think.
We are becoming algorithms.
Like our search results, like every time we learn,
you have different search results
Google
than
now.
I have. Your search results are different than my search results.
Which is
if we were to, yeah. I mean, and that's sculpting your reality. That is sculpting like everything that you're thinking about.
It determines what ideas you're exposed to. Like,
it's not what to think; it's what to think about. Poli-sci 101.
It's to changing your reference points when you're thinking about things.
And
what
so
do I already know?
So you wondered, like, also the circumstance, like the political environment now, and how it's so divided. And I'm like, and it's very extreme. It's very extreme in like the directions that it's extreme. Like, we need to have a group to like have.
And it'll continue to become more extreme because every time the pendulum swings, it bashes things further apart.
Yeah, it definitely feels like this entropy kind of like fragmenting, like becoming more extreme. And it's like, is it gonna, like, is it the heat death of the universe? Is it the Great Rip? You know, you've probably read about that. It's like the Big Bang or the Big Rip, or like basically where like the universe like rips in half. It's like, is society gonna completely like rip in half? Like, or are we gonna like, are we gonna implode and come like back together?
The thing is, like, when you like, so I've done my own kind of independent like studying of like state collapse, and when it happens, it happens really gradually and subtly. It doesn't happen suddenly. So how long has this been happening? Like, this started a long fucking time ago. I mean, I feel like the collapse of our state, like our state being like our nation and shit, our country and our culture, like our society, I guess.
Those are different.
Which I know,
those like levels of collapse.
Yeah, totally. But like I feel like it's all gonna collapse. And when the collapse happens, a lot of paradigms that existed before continue to exist.
I feel like, I'm trying to think of this. It's like Maslow's hierarchy, but it's like the levels of state of collapse, and they start with like, you know, just like the identity, you know, until like all the way into like a complete like disbandment of a society. And I think like right now we're kind of experiencing that like identity like fragmentation. You know, the amount of like bumper stickers that I've seen that have some various words to say about the president, you know, it's like, wow, there's a lot of people right now that are just like, I do not identify with the ruler of my country.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, that's how that's in some places like they lock people up that say those things.
I have there's a person who I really want to have on this podcast, doctorate in archaeology, I think, who is really interested in state collapse. And some of what I've learned just from things that I've heard from them. But I can't wait to have that conversation and talk about what's going on right now around us.
Yeah.
This shit's fucking crazy.
I heard that so this was like this was the longest government shutdown in the history of the U.S. government, and they were saying that if the shutdown continued like another week, that like basically like the transportation infrastructure would have like completely shut down. So like train drivers, like flight attendants. It would have just, and then you think about like, well, how are they getting groceries into the cities? That
my life almost went to shit because one of the people who pays me wasn't making any money because they're paid by the government. It's crazy. It affects us in weird ways.
Yeah, I get paid from in one of my jobs. Like some of that money comes from state funding.
Yeah. But what's crazy, dude, is like what really drove me a little bit crazy was like during that time there was people who were like buying groceries and like donating, and it was in the news, like people are like supporting their government employees.
Get a free loaf of bread at Great Harvest.
Yeah, but what's fucked up, dude, is like, what about all the other fucking people, all the kids that are starving all the time, in not just in third world countries, here. There are fucking children all over the place who are hungry. There are people lining up around the fucking block at the food bank several days a week trying to get food. Like those, what about them? It's not like we can't make the assumption that those people are not also serving their community in some way. But yet the reason why everyone feels this need to be patriotic and show up and support these government employees who aren't making money because our fucking president sucks, like they don't feel the need to like be patriotic and show up for their fucking fellow citizens who are probably serving them in some other way and are not able to fucking make a life for themselves because our president sucks. Like come on. This is happening all the fucking time, but now all of a sudden it's getting...
Well, I feel like that's sort of this response to any kind of like crisis. I feel like, at least in the West, and particularly in like liberal pockets, there's like a mass shooting in like a particular area, but it's mostly like white people,
and
or
everyone's talking about it and everyone's freaking
they're like,
out
well,
for
what
like
about
5 minutes.
these other people? You know what I mean? Like I mean, there's always going to be
I'm trying to Robin Hood this shit. Like, look, we got these government employees who are having a hard time right now, but like this is not a new thing. This is always happening. I'm not trying to like say, yeah, but what about blah blah blah. I'm just saying like this is always happening. Like let's not make this just a popular topic right now. Like because it's like when a fucking celebrity like dies or commits suicide or something, there's this like sadness, this like outcry that happens and
on the internet,
right? But
that may or may not be real,
right? But people die every fucking day.
That's what I'm saying. Like the outcry and the sadness, like may or may not be.
There are people who die that nobody ever fucking knows about because those people were so isolated that they didn't have anyone who ever fucking missed them, and like this is happening all the time. Yet when Robin Williams commits suicide, it's really fucking sad because he was depressed. Oh no, that's really sad. Look, there are people who are so fucking depressed that nobody knows they exist. I
mean, people not knowing that they exist in their depression, I don't necessarily think are...
I do, because I know what it feels like to be depressed and not want to be involved in your community.
But it doesn't mean that nobody knows that you don't exist. You're like, you're depressed because nobody knows you exist.
You have
a sense that...
If I feel like forgotten and disconnected from everybody because I'm depressed, like if I feel like I don't even deserve to be part of like something, like when I'm really fucking depressed, like I'll stay in this house for a really long time. And like, it's easy for me to feel like I don't get any phone calls. Like people are really disconnected already. Even when they're not depressed. So I don't get fucking phone calls when I am. So in that state of mind, it's really easy to feel like I'm really fucking disconnected and like nobody fucking cares about me. And so
I feel like that's becoming incredibly common with like the younger generations because they've grown up and like experienced puberty mediated through these like social media platforms that I think have completely changed the way that you develop relationships with people.
That's and why parenting also is so important.
Yeah, and like how you're able to communicate with your peers, how you're able to reach out and build intimate connections and not just be... I mean, I had a friend come into town last night who moved out of Bellingham and now he's back, and it was like, hey, like, how's it going? I'm just like, I haven't talked to you in a very long time. I've seen that you've been doing things, I've interacted with, I've commented on your stuff. You've liked my stuff. I've liked your stuff, but we haven't had a real human hug, So these things may or may not be real. You're a totally different person when you get behind a screen, including being inflammatory and being insensitive and all that stuff. It's like, if we were all in a room looking at each other, would we be, it's like, no, when we're all in a room, I say this when I go out now and I see like how the younger folks like interact, and
they're hanging out in a
just
room,
like
sitting
they're
with their
all
phones.
and they're like taking Instagram videos and
tagging each other.
everyone's all Insta worthy
to each other.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, we gotta post. It's all posting, and I'm sure there's people who are more analog out there.
But I do think that like feeling invisible and being depressed they go hand in hand. Feeling depressed, part of that is feeling like you're not worth being known or acknowledged, or
You're not feeling connected.
yeah, you don't feel
There's
connected.
a lack of connection.
Like how many people need to reach out and they don't because they don't want to bother anyone because they don't feel like they're fucking worth it. Like that's a part of depression, is you just feel like you're not worth shit, and it's never going to change. And part of that is, so then you isolate yourself, you alienate yourself, and if that goes on long enough, people will fucking forget about you. And like people do. I mean, if I didn't ever fucking like something of yours on Facebook, like if me and you like didn't talk for a long time, but I like never liked your shit on Facebook, I never like commented on your shit, never sent you a text, whatever, I mean, you would forget about me. That's just unfortunately with the way that our fucking the way that communication
You, as in
works
Zoe,
now,
would forget about Benji?
I really think that that's the case. Like, and it's not a diss, but that's like
No,
how,
that's your experience. That's your experience.
It's my experience, and it's how communication is like kind of engineered in our fucking society now. Is like, if you don't see this fucking thing all the time as you're scrolling on Facebook, then you forget it exists. Because like you said, staring into this computer all day, this becomes my world. Mm-hmm. And like, it colors my reality. It's everything that I know. And that's how I'm connected with people. It's really unfortunate, but that's the case. And not just me, but like a lot of fucking people. And so when you go into a depression and then you recede back into this like isolated space and you feel like you're not worth anything to society, and you just don't like take initiative to connect with society, then you can just fade into the distant fucking past of everybody who you knew. And then like when that happens, nobody's reaching out to you anymore. And then it's this self-perpetuating thing. And that's happening all the fucking time.
Yeah.
When my father died, nobody fucking knew about it. I still see people who knew him and informing them that he killed himself. Like people who I met through him. And I only knew him for a few years. Like, but I met them through him. And so these are people who like were part of his life to the degree that like in the few years that I was interacting with him, like he talked about them, told me stories about them, and introduced me to those people. And to this day, I mean, that happened in 2012. And to this day, I'm still seeing people who don't know that he's dead. Like, yet when Robin Williams kills himself, everybody is fucking sad about it and still talking about it.
I think if you've experienced like suicidal ideation or attempted suicide, or you've had somebody that's committed suicide in your life, like I'm sure your response to like what would seem to be a glorification of suicide, you know, mediated by Hollywood and social media, that would probably, that like touches a nerve.
It's
you know, I see that and I'm just like, you know, I worked in a psychiatric ward and
it's
you know, had people on there that had, you know, attempted suicide and were like super fucked up, you know, like physically from like their suicide attempts. And I see like, I don't know if that's made me a little more morbid in my like perception of the importance of human life, but it just feels very fragile. It's
like loss, grief, or suffering of any kind. It's happening all around us all the fucking time, and people are not being compassionate with each other. I see it all the time. But if you go watch a movie in the movie theater and it's a really popular movie and everyone's talking about it, like Forrest fucking Gump, and everyone's like watching the movie and they're just like, oh my God, it's so heart touching and all this stuff. Why do you need to go to the movie theater and have that feeling? But you can walk down the street and see the guy laying on the fucking concrete in his vomit, and you can tell yourselves all these fucking stories, but you don't have the same compassionate fucking response to that. Like, what's the problem here? Like, that's what I'm talking about.
Because it's a fantasy.
it's a fantasy either way, because they never knew anything about the guy on the ground either.
Yeah, I guess like maybe there's like one where you're like, you have more control over, I mean, it's like you're going to like consume something. I feel like at a movie you're like consuming something, whereas like on the street it's more like things are happening to you, like you can't control, like, I mean, I guess you could not, and I think that that's like a symptom of depression is agoraphobia, you know. It's like I'm not going outside because I can't, if I see a particular thing, like I might not be able to like hold it together, even though it's like it would be maybe fairly benign to like someone who's not experiencing this like mental health.
It's crazy because like, or it's ironic because back in the day, like with Greek theater, like the theater was the plays were being written by like philosophers and playwrights who were like really intelligent, and the whole purpose of it was to bring people together to try to teach them lessons and moral, like pass on moral ideas about how we should be respecting each other. And like Greek tragedy and comedy, all of it was like the tragedy part of it. The whole purpose of those plays was so that everyone could come together and learn something about like a moral idea that they hadn't, that maybe probably wasn't popular at the time. And they were usually the playwrights and the philosophers were like part of the high society. So it's like these like people, the patriarchy, I guess, who was like running shit, and they were like trying to like sort of govern the people by spreading ideas. It was like their version of a TED Talk, except it was like a play. Mm-hmm. And the tragedies were supposed to give people a release. What's the word that I'm thinking of?
That like, for some reason, Allegory of the Cave comes to mind, but
I'm thinking of like when you like, what's the word for when you have like a release of emotion? Anyway, it's supposed to like draw people in and then give them like a release of emotion in a way that like where because they're able to relate and connect with the characters. All the characters, the villain, like the protagonist, the antagonist, if it's a tragedy, the person who dies, the person who does the killing, all of it. You're supposed to relate to it, and then you feel this sense of release and you learn something from it. And it's supposed to change the way that you relate to the people who are in your community. Like that was
theater.
The way right. But now, yeah, here we are. Like we can see a guy. We can follow someone's story in a movie, feel for them, feel compassion, feel like, oh man, I can relate to all these people and I feel bad for all of them, and or whatever, like not even necessarily feeling bad, but just being able to like see the humanity of the person. But then like walk down the street and be completely disconnected from what's happening. There's like all these people who don't have homes.
I don't know if I feel that way when I go to the movie theater. I go to the movie theater fairly regularly, and I'm usually disappointed in the trope nature of at least most of the female characters that are depicted in Hollywood. You're like, really, that's like the only character development that you can have. Like,
kind of
for
goes
her.
Along with what I'm saying, because I don't think that theater is accomplishing the same thing anymore.
Yeah, it seems more about the like effects and the adrenaline rush of it all, because you know people are becoming more desensitized to that kind of stuff. That's why everything has to just keep getting more epic and loud and like longer car chases and bigger explosions. It's a distraction from reality rather than like a lesson about reality that brings people closer to reality. Yep.
It's
and that's like you can see in a movie theater when you like look at people and everyone's like zombied out. You're like, wow, people are not in their bodies right now. People are not in their own experience. They're going out there.
They're brain dead, rather they're like looking there like catatonic like vegetables, whereas like I don't know because I wasn't there back in the day in the Greek fucking theaters, but I mean I imagine that like if you're doing a good job, people were having like physical responses, like their bodies were like, I don't know, dude, it's like go to a comedy show. You don't want people looking at you like a zombie. Like you're not doing a good job if that's what's happening. You
want them engaged.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just I don't know. I think that's a huge part of it, is like we're just turning into these zombies where like we're being removed from our reality instead of like brought back into what it actually means to be a fucking human being, and to respect that and see it in other people and appreciate it and love each other. So, it's a negativity podcast.
It's real and authentic.
The authentic pessimist
Warrior,
podcast.
I'm just saying, like, warrior is like war. There's like a warness about it. You know, it's like a battle without, within. And that like determination and discipline to persevere in the face of hardship.
And resilience to me is, to be a warrior is to be resilient. That's what it means to me. I changed my name to that because I want my kids to, I don't know. It was more about what I want them to, how I want them to identify themselves, I guess. But like resilience to me is like to go through hardship and feel broken, and then somehow be able to experience something during that time, somewhere between your perception of the experience and the things that happen to you in the experience. There are tools that you can use to prepare yourself to live a better life. Like a lot of what I do in this podcast is learning about people's stories and the shit that has been really fucking difficult for them, and then drawing the connection between like those experiences and how those experiences and how they coped with them, and how the way that they coped with it prepared them to be fully engaged in and like present with the things that they love in their life now. And I think that's what resilience really is. It's like transmutating shit into something beautiful.
You're like a composting toilet.
A composting toilet.
You're like,
yeah.
look at this, like,
that's how I see myself.
Yeah. You know, you just keep shitting on top of it, and in the bottom there's like this rich soil that you don't want to fertilize vegetables with, but like fruit trees is fine.
I guess I'm the composting toilet, yeah. Lotus flowers growing out of fucking essentially swamp sludge. Like lotus flowers grow out of the grossest, nastiest, thickest, filthiest, most biologically
active.
Diverse. Yeah. Fucking, yeah.
Biologically active.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. I have to pee really bad. We've been going for, holy shit, 3 hours. Doesn't surprise me. Not at all.
Did you like how I wore my cat meme shirt? So that, you know, I was like, this might be really serious, but it can't be too serious because it's Sunday and I want to chill out on Sunday.
Yeah. All right. Would you mind cracking my back on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Oh my. Oh.
It's so effervescent.
Felt really good. Thank you.
Yeah. So where can they find your stuff?
AuthenticWarrior.org.
Ooh, .org.
Yeah, because .com was $2,500. Yeah. Or you can go to Spotify and search it, or you can just Google Authentic Warrior Radio.
You're all over that.
It's on
SEO.
iTunes. It's everywhere. And as long as we're on the topic, anybody who's listening, if you dig this and you want to help me reach more people and you want to be supportive, a really easy way of doing that is subscribing to me on iTunes and giving me a little bit of a review or rating. That would be dope.
Woo!
Okay, well, thank you for being here. It was huge. Seriously. It's a big thing. Obviously, if anyone's made it through this whole fucking thing, they've heard all this. Like,
what's my name?
Was Zoie Mizuna.
Mizuna.
Zoie Mizuna. Is the emphasis on the first syllable?
On the me.
Okay, Mizuna. Thank you for being here, Zoie Mizuna. I'm serious. It's been
good.
Yeah.
We got through some stuff.
I was scared as shit. I was really scared. I'm happy though. So, all right. And without further ado, I'm going to let you all go. I love you.